Hopefully you're not upset about that. You don't have to wait 2 more minutes for the show. It is time for a Jeranism show. It is a doubleheader today. Hopefully you enjoyed the last one, where I showed that I filmed a SpaceX rocket launch last night, and again, didn't see the rocket for a minute and 10 seconds, a minute and 11 seconds, which is very strange. Where was that rocket for a minute and 11 seconds? So check that out. That went live before that. But for now, we are talking aviation and a moment in time that many people thought would never happen. And that is Wolfie6020 joining me here on the channel to talk aviation. And we've got Robert Greenlee as well. They're both pilots. We'll be bringing them on in 1 second. Gentlemen, how's it going?
It's going fantastic.
Good. And tell people who you are, Robert. I don't think people know you. And we will go from there.
I think quite a few people know me because I've been kind of doing this, debunking flat earthers, almost as long as you've been doing it as well. Obviously not as big of a name, but I've been kind of the reason I kind of came on is I've asked Nathan for many, many years to debate me on the topic of aviation because he's quite frequently said things that are incorrect. And he's always said, no. I've been a pilot for about 21 years as a private pilot. I will not claim to be a commercial pilot, as somebody we know did in the past. I'm a private pilot with instrument rating, so I just fly for fun. I'll let Wolfie introduce himself because he's actually on the professional pilot side.
Okay, 1 second. I've got you guys coming up on screen. This will be shocking because I don't think people have ever seen, well, at least I have never seen Wolfie before. So we'll get him on.
Yeah. I'm just in a hotel room, and the way I've got it set up is I've got the laptop off the side, and I set up a large monitor. So I'll just put the video on to say hello to everybody.
Hold on 1 second. We're going to get you on there. We didn't have you on there. 1 second.
Okay.
Give me 2 seconds. There we go. It's a little better. And all right, there we go. So there you are. All right. You're in a hotel. I see that. Great.
Hello,
nice.
everybody. Yeah, I'm just in the USA at the moment, a fairly long trip. And just the way I've got it set up in the hotel, I've got the laptop off to the side, and I use a big monitor. It just makes it much easier to do the work because usually when we're here for an extended period. So after this intro, I'll just basically go back to off camera so that I'm looking through the monitor.
Well, nice to meet you finally. And I do have a question, though. I wondered why in these last 10 years, why did you never just tell me that the Earth was a ball?
I tried.
Maybe you did tell me that. I think about it.
No,
maybe you did. Now that I think about it, maybe you did tell me. All right. Well, thank you for saying hello to everybody. That's awesome. And I believe, Robert, are you going to be doing a presentation? Is that the plan?
I will. I'll start sharing my screen whenever you're ready.
I'm ready for you. Okay. Doesn't seem to all fit on the screen for some reason. We should. I don't know if we didn't. It ends. It says just a bit of back and then G. Back G. On your screen, do you see the whole thing?
Yeah.
I can see the whole thing.
Wait, you can see the whole thing?
I can in my Zoom window. I'm not looking at it on the live stream.
Yeah, on the Zoom window though, it doesn't end where it says Will Duffy he continue.
No. Yeah.
Wolfie, do you see where it says Will Duffy he continue on that first line?
I can read the whole thing. Will Duffy continued to many false claims about aviation.
Yeah, it looks like you're zoomed in on it a bit, Jaron.
Okay, 1 second. Let me try and fix that. I don't know why I'm not seeing the whole thing. Let me see if I expand this far out. Okay, there. That's weird.
But while you work on that, I'll just kind of do a little bit of introduction.
Sure. Now I fixed it, so you're good.
I actually had the pleasure of meeting Wolfie a couple of weeks ago. I actually met him for dinner with Will Duffy. And as we're talking, we were like, you know what? Nathan Thompson will refuse to debate me one-on-one. And a lot of times he's looking for the big names. So maybe if Wolfie and I both challenge him, Nathan won't be able to resist that. But as you guys know, Nathan came back and said, pay me $200 to debate me. But as far as we can tell, Nathan's been on Modern Day Debate many, many times. Everybody I've talked to who's been on there said, well, NBD never pays them. So maybe we could ask James if he's paying Nathan. So Nathan basically is just using his $200 debate fee as a paywall because he knows that if he goes up against two pilots, it will look really, really bad. It didn't go very well for him a couple weeks ago when he debated Will Duffy and the topic came up. We're going to play that clip of as they're interacting in just a minute. So Nathan's simply just being a coward, as he usually is. We even offered to pay him $50 ahead of time And then once he showed up and actually participated in the debate versus just waffling, we pay him the rest of the money. We even paid Jaron the money ahead of time. So Jaron's got the money in his account. Nathan still refuses. So those of you that follow Nathan, ask yourself, why would Nathan refuse the topic to debate actual pilots or any other professional? If you go in his history, he never does it. He'll always avoid debating somebody. So just kind of review where we're at. We gave Nathan every opportunity we could think of to come on and discuss this with us, and he just said no, as we kind of expected.
Yeah, and I was offered that $50 up front, and then just told him, hey, just as long as you answer all the questions and don't not show up, you'll get the other $150. And he chose not to. That's fine. That's up to him. One thing I wanted to mention real quick, just to you guys, because some I saw my last video, I mentioned it again, but it's one of the things that I think is the most glaring issues with the flat Earth that I can't really remember anybody telling me for 10 years. This one I'm being serious on. I measured the line of longitude at the southernmost part of Australia and got to about 60 miles was the line of longitude. I don't remember exactly where I was at, just south of Australia. And then you take that and make that your radius from the North Pole, and I think I came up with 53,000 miles would be the circumference of that circle, meaning we can divide that by 360 and get the line of longitude on the flat Earth, which comes out to like 145. So that's almost 3 times the size, meaning that if you got in a car and you were driving somewhere that's 60 miles and you said, we'll be there in an hour, that you'd get there in 3. And so that would be exposed pretty damn quick.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sydney to Perth is the most common route that I've flown. I've flown it more than 100 times each way, and I've also driven it in the car a number of times. It's around 4,000 kilometres by road. There are lots of turns and hills and whatever, but that matches pretty closely to the roughly 1,800 nautical miles that we fly by air. So, yeah, Australia is definitely not short and fat as it's depicted on the AE map.
Yeah, I know it'd have to be. It seems to be about 3,000 or 3 times as long, or maybe 2.5 at least. So, all right. Anyway, let's get started. So we'll be talking aviation. I'm excited. Let's hear it. Go ahead, Robert.
Okay, let's play just a couple-minute clip of Nathan's debate with Will a couple weeks ago, and we'll see how many lies can Nathan tell in 60 seconds. Listen in.
Let's talk about Southern flights. So Critical Think flew nonstop from Santiago, Chile to Sydney, Australia. Can you please explain how that flight is possible on a flat Earth and where the path of that flight travels on a flat Earth?
I don't know. I haven't taken that flight. I just test the floor. Well, that's what I do. But I do have pitch data from a 2-hour airplane flight, United Airlines flight. Here's the pitch data. If anybody needs it, send me an email, flatearthflyers@gmail.com. But the pitch data shows that the airplane flew straight and level for 2 hours. Now, if you do the math for the globe religion, after 2 hours of flying straight and level, you would be 120 miles above the surface of the Earth. You could almost stop at the ISS and pick up those stranded astronauts, if this was the case, guys. But yeah, we got the pitch data. The attitude indicator only works if the plane is flying straight and level over a flat, non-rotating Earth, and the FAA trains pilots on the target generation facility, which is a flat Earth simulator that negates rotation and negates a gravity vector. So airplane flights aren't doing your curve any justice.
Okay, Nathan. So you went off topic again. We're talking about a very specific flight that's part of the final experiment. You have not explained how that flight works on a flat Earth, and you actually just said something completely false. Number one, the FAA does not train pilots, so you should stop saying that. Number two, pilots do not train on a target generation facility. That's false. Where did you get this? It's completely wrong. Was this from TikTok?
The Federal Aviation Administration assumes a flat Earth when training pilots and air traffic controllers using their target generation facility. The TGF consists of several software programs that control simulation scenarios using simulated aircraft. The TGF computer simulator drive almost all of the air traffic control laboratories of the FAA William J. Hughes Technical Center. The FAA states, our lab has worked closely with the TGF group to have aircraft perform the way air traffic controllers would expect them to behave in a real, natural airspace systems. NAS.
What are you reading from?
This is from The Greatest Lie on Earth by Edward Hendry, and it has citations from the FAA website.
Okay, so number one, the FAA does not train pilots. You are incorrect there. They certify pilots. They don't train them. Number two, pilots are not trained on a target generation facility. That's for air traffic controllers. That's not for pilots. If you go find a pilot and ask him if he was trained on a target generation facility, he's going to say no, because they're not trained on a TGF. So you should just correct that going forward, because it's wrong. This is one of the issues that I found in the flat earth community, is they don't do research with people that might disagree with them.
Oops. Okay, on the way it just changed slides on me there. But you basically kind of heard three things that Nathan said. Pitch data proves the plane does not find a curvature of Earth. We're going to talk about that in detail in a little while. Attitude indicators only work on flat Earth, and aircraft can fly off into space like a space shuttle, even though they're aircraft and not spacecraft. And the target generation facility is used to train pilots. This is one of Nathan's very, very first claims. He was in the flyers that he used to hand out by the thousands to people. So let's talk about this a little bit.
Let's talk about Southern flights.
There we go.
And that he mentioned Edward Hendry, and you don't want to get any information from that guy. I've been following him around for a week, and he's been telling lies about TFE up and down the place. On different
so I was
channels.
so glad that Nathan did that when we said what his source. So instead of going to the actual FAA website, which is what this is right here, that talks about a target generation facility, he chooses to use a conspiracy book by Edward Hendry as his authoritative source of information. And actually, you can go out. I have a link here if you want to. This will be available if you want to go to these links afterwards. This is the actual website to the FAA. This is a link to an archived copy of Edward Hendry's book. So you can go look at what he actually said. But none of that information that Nathan read out is actually from the official source. Edward Hendry made it all up about pilots being trained on the TGF. Even Nathan's own words, simulating traffic. Absolutely nothing in there has anything to do with training pilots, unless Nathan thinks that maybe the FAA is training fighter pilots, and that's why they're generating traffic targets for them. TGF is only used to train air traffic controllers. The only, in my research area I found that pilots ever get involved is occasionally they'll bring a pilot in to basically pretend that they're flying an airplane to give somebody for the air traffic controllers to talk to. But TGF only used to train air traffic controllers. Another claim of his that TGF is based on flat Earth. If this is the article they pulled that from the FAA. If you look at it in detail, this implies necessarily the Earth's rotation and the variation of the gravity vector with position over the Earth were ignored in developing the aircraft equations of motion. This simplification limits our mathematical model to flight of aircraft only. The model will not properly handle the flight of suborbital craft, spacecraft, intercontinental ballistic missiles, satellites, or the space shuttle. The model is adequate for all vehicles traveling under Mach 3. So they're basically telling you, just like the articles that flat earthers bring up as, oh, the aircraft is designed for a flat Earth, but then they ignored the other parameters of, the aircraft is of constant mass, meaning it never burns fuel, it never, changes cargo. They'll say the aircraft is a rigid body. Another thing that's not true of aircraft outside of a model. They have, control surfaces that move, wings that flex, engines that spin. So again, taken out of context. On the very next page, very next section, again, notice, unlike Nathan, I'm actually putting the citations out here so you can go look it up yourself. Very next section, TGF dynamics model uses WS84. It's a model of a spheroid Earth modeled as shown in the figure 2.13 below. So from the very same document, they're basically telling you they're using the globe. So that one's busted.
Yeah, absolutely. If I could add my 2 cents worth, the first I ever heard of the TGF was from Will Duffy asking me if I was trained on the TGF, and I didn't even know what it was. And that was in our WhatsApp group that we've got, a Wolfpack WhatsApp group. We've got Where's Wally there, Critical Think, and quite a few other people now. Will's in it, and we also have an Australian air traffic controller, and he was the one that basically explained that they use it for air traffic control training. It's certainly not something I've ever used to be trained by, and it's not something that is used to train pilots at all.
And you said that Edward Hendry, that's not even in his book, or you said it is in his book?
It is in his book. He does make those claims in his book. And That's where Nathan's parroting from.
But no source from Mr. Hendry. Right. I mean, that guy was telling lies about the trip and everything, and I tried to reach out to him and say, hey, do you want to come on my show? Rather than going on all these other shows lying about me, why don't you come and ask me? And he declined. So it's like none of these people want to actually do real research or actually go to the source. Wouldn't that be easier?
Absolutely, yeah. I was impressed with how many things Nathan got wrong in just a few sentences. I was listening and just smiling that everything that was rolling off his tongue was just completely wrong. But we'll get to that.
Yep. Oops, I wish this darn thing would quit changing slides on me without me doing it. This particular slide, another claim of flat earthers is that, pilots are trained to fly over a flat earth. Here are several references, some of the things I've used in the past, typically for American pilots, but I imagine these are probably used for other pilots as well. You got the official training guides from the FAA, King School, Sporty's Pilot Institute. These are third-party commercial training providers that provide training. Challenge any flat earther, go out to all these resources. The FAA stuff is free, Pilot Institute is free, King Schools and Sporties you do have to pay for. But if you want to go through that material and find a single reference where it trains pilots that you're flying over flat earth, I'll give you $1,000 if you find a single reference in any one of those saying the earth is flat.
And I'll double that. that. They won't do it there. When I was doing my air transport pilot license theory, that was in 1983 at Sydney Technical College in Australia. The air transport navigation subject was a lot more complicated than the commercial level. So I just finished my commercial level and I signed up straight away for the ATPL. Every one of us had a little globe on the desk because it just made it so much easier to visualize what they were talking about when they talk about the great circles. And we each had a globe on our desk, and we were wondering if we could take these globes into the exam, and the answer was no. We were not allowed to take anything, but we were allowed to take pencil sharpeners. And you might remember that you could get a pencil sharpener with a little globe on it. Any of you remember that? We were able to get pencil sharpeners with a tiny little globe on it. So that's what we took into the exam, and it was fine. And it just helped you visualize things in 3 dimensions, because some of the questions were quite involved, had a lot of calculations, and just having a 3D depiction made it a lot easier.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the atmosphere a little bit. And the reason we're talking about this is because it's probably one of the most critical things to flight. Obviously, as everybody understands, I think even you typically get flat earthers to admit that there is a pressure gradient in the atmosphere going from about 14.7 psi at sea level. And as you go higher and higher, it gets less and less. So if you're looking at, the standard cruising altitude of an airliner, you go from 14.7 psi down to only 3.4 psi. So why is this important? We're flying airplanes. They need air for different things. We need air going across the wings to create lift. We need air going to the engine for combustion. We need air going through the propellers and the jet engines to create thrust. So whenever they claim that an aircraft can just, if they don't dip the nose, they'll keep flying off into space. Well, there's an issue with that. There's no air and no pressure up in space. The higher you go, the less air there is. Without air, airplanes don't fly. Every aircraft has a service ceiling. So the airplane I typically fly has a service ceiling of 16,000 feet. The one that Wolfie flies, that's a really cool kick-ass jet, 51,000 feet. But any higher than that, there's no longer enough air pressure to actually sustain flight. So that whole theory of, hey, the airplane's going to keep flying off into space, it's impossible. The airplane will stall, the engine will fail, other bad things. And we'll talk about that, especially around the pitch data, about why the pilots don't need to dip their nose.
Yeah, absolutely. If I could just jump in there. For an airplane to fly, it has to develop enough lift to compensate for the weight of the aircraft, and that's what the wings do. And to develop lift, it has to move through the air. So there has to be a certain amount of air passing over the wings to generate sufficient lift. As you go higher, the air becomes thinner. So you have to fly faster to develop the same amount of lift. And that's one of the benefits of flying at these high altitudes. We're actually flying a lot faster than we can fly at closer to the ground. The problem is, as you go higher, the air becomes thinner. The engines are not able to produce as much thrust. So whilst you're requiring to fly faster as you go higher, the available thrust becomes less and less. And eventually you reach a point where the engines are simply not producing enough thrust, even at full throttle, to fly level. And there's just no chance that the aircraft can go any higher at that point, because even with full throttle, there's not enough power to even fly level. So that's regarded in aviation as the absolute ceiling. It's the maximum height that you can take an aircraft up. And if you tried to fly any higher, the speed is just going to reduce. And as Robert said, you'll eventually stall. And when you stall, you're just going to start falling back down towards the ground. So the idea of being able to fly off into space is completely ridiculous. It means they don't really understand aerodynamics. They don't understand how thrust is developed in a jet engine or a propeller engine. And they're not cognizant of absolute ceiling, which you can Google. Just type in the words absolute ceiling aircraft and you'll see plenty of information confirming what I've just said.
Does that change per aircraft, or are you saying there's an ultimate ceiling?
No, it definitely does change per aircraft, and it also changes depending upon the weight. Now, our certified ceiling is 51,000 feet. Now, we can get up there quite easily. If it was light, if the aircraft was light, it could probably go a little bit higher. So 51,000 feet is a bit of a certification limit, which I can talk about in a minute. But yeah, it does definitely vary from aircraft to aircraft. If you're in a small piston engine light aircraft, you'll be lucky to get to 15,000 feet. It's going to run out of thrust well and truly before that. Some jets can get up to 40, 45,000 feet. Corporate jets can go a little bit higher. Military jets can go higher again. So it depends on a lot of factors, but probably the main one would be the thrust to weight ratio, the amount of thrust that the engines can produce compared to the weight of the aircraft. The better the thrust to weight ratio, generally the higher the aircraft could fly.
Great, thank you.
One thing I didn't mention is the reasoning for having a pressure gradient. I mean, we know the reasoning is gravity, but if you always listen, one of the things that weathers always say is that you need a container to hold in the atmosphere. If that were the case, you wouldn't have the pressure gradient. And then whenever they say that, my typical response is, okay, well, where do you have pressure next to a vacuum? You kind of look here, is it at 250,000 feet? Well, pressure is now, many, many, many decimals. So there is no point that you have some level of pressure right next to a vacuum, because it just gets lower and lower and lower until you actually get to a vacuum. So that claim is also debunked. And
I think some of them denied a pressure gradient in the beginning. I'm not sure if that's true, but certainly I think they all accept that there is a pressure gradient now. That's the whole reason aircraft are pressurized. Our aircraft is pressurized to a differential of 10.7 psi, which is quite a lot. It means when we're up at 45,000 feet, the altitude in the cabin, or the equivalent pressure in the cabin, is what it would be at 4,500 feet. So if we lose pressurization, and we see that in movies, Hollywood movies showing aircraft explosive decompression, all the oxygen masks drop out. At 45,000 feet, if we had an explosive decompression, the air density, air pressure is so low that we would literally pass out within seconds. It's about 5 to 10 seconds at that altitude before the pilots will pass out. So we've got that brief amount of time to put the oxygen masks on. Now, generally you'll find that airliners, United Airlines, American Airlines, Qantas, they won't fly above 41,000 feet. And again, that's just the certification, because the lower you are, the longer that time of useful consciousness. It's called time of useful consciousness. If you're at 25,000 feet, it can be measured in minutes. You lose pressurization at 25,000 feet, you can still remain conscious for many minutes. But up at 45,000 feet, it's a matter of seconds. And one of the safety features we have on board our aircraft, because it can fly up to 51,000 feet, is an emergency descent system. It's completely automatic. So if we're at 51,000 feet and we had an explosive decompression, there'd be probably at least an 80% chance that everybody on board would pass out within just a few seconds. There'd be insufficient time to grab your oxygen mask and put it on. The airplane would detect that, and it automatically closes the throttles. It engages the autopilot if it's not already engaged, and it puts it into a maximum rate descent down to 15,000 feet and levels off. And the airplane does that completely by itself with no input from the pilots to basically keep everybody on board alive. And this is a feature of aircraft that fly at these heights. Now, airliners generally don't have that because the certification limit keeps them under 41,000 feet. But none of that would exist if there wasn't a pressure gradient.
Yeah.
And it would be true if it wasn't for gravity, then the atmosphere would go into space.
It should equalize, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No argument with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's pretty much the same thing. I saw somebody in the comments saying, well, it's not gravity, it's density. If you think about if anybody has ever scuba dived, it's pretty much the exact same thing. For every 33 feet you descend under the surface, the water pressure is now double what it was at the surface. So if you're 100 feet underwater, you're at 3 times the pressure. So if you think about, well, it's density causing that. Well, the water is all mixing together. Mm. So if it's the density of the water, why would you have pressure gradient inside of water? Another question I've never gotten an answer for, unless you have something that's basically pushing down or pulling it down, which would not be density. So just something to think about.
Yeah, I think it's fairly simple to understand if you just think about the weight of the water above you. You know, right. You've got nothing above you, but you go down 100 meters, you've got a huge amount of water above you that is pushing down, and the further down you go, the more water that there is.
Yeah. This particular slide, I know you guys have been reading it for the past 2 minutes as we're talking. So it's a little bit remedial for those of you who know something about it. But really, the 4 forces of flight, we have the thrust, which is basically making the airplane go forward, which is then generating lift as the wings go through the air. They generate lift, which is opposite of weight. Sometimes you'll see it represented as gravity, but in this case, it's weight. So if the airplane weighs 20,000 pounds and I'm flying along nice and level, maintaining altitude, I've got 20,000 pounds of lift counteracting the weight of the airplane. And of course, drag is basically everything on the airplane, the structure of the airplane, parasitic drag, everything that's basically trying to slow you down. So if you lose thrust, you're going to slow down because you've got drag. Another part is not only the altitude. It also, where other things that affect us are even things as temperature. As a good example, the airport I fly out of is about 6,000 feet of altitude above sea level. On a hot day in the middle of the summer, we can have what we call density altitude. It's a calculation of what the airplane thinks the air is at. So here I am at 6,000 feet, and the airplane thinks it's at over 10,000 feet. So if you've ever flown into someplace like Arizona in the middle of summer, on one of the small commuter jets, and they cancel your flight because the airplane doesn't have enough power to get off the ground, that's because of density altitude.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's many things that kind of go into this for the performance of the airplane, but it's kind of setting a little bit of background for our future discussion.
Yeah, we fly out of Eagle County in Colorado sometimes, and that's surrounded by hills. Now, the plane that I fly, it has the range to go from basically Denver all the way back to Sydney, if we have full fuel. But going out of Eagle County, we can't take full fuel because of the hills. We have to be at a correct weight that will allow us to not crash into the hills in the event of losing an engine. It's one of the requirements for the certification. If we lose an engine during the takeoff roll at the most critical phase, we still have to have enough performance to clear the hills. And going out of Eagle County, it's quite limiting. Like we're about 20,000 pounds less than our maximum takeoff weight just to satisfy the requirements. And unfortunately, because of that, we don't have the range to go all the way to Sydney. So on the way home, we will generally stop in Honolulu for a refuel.
So have you flown the jet into Leadville yet?
Into where?
Into Leadville.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, Leadville is the highest paved airport in North America. I think if I remember correctly, the field elevation is right about 9,000 feet.
Wow. No, that one.
Yeah, so as I'm looking at, so 9,934 feet.
Yeah, that's huge. Our aircraft's limited to 10,000, so we could legally go in there, but no, I haven't been to that one.
Yeah. And even though it's 39 degrees up in the mountains right now, density altitude is just shy of 11,000 feet.
Wow.
So the airplanes think it's 11,000 feet. We go up there in the summertime, it's showing 14, 15, sometimes 16,000 feet. And I think a little airplane like I fly, we only fly in there in the morning when the air's cool. Because if we stay till the afternoon when it gets warm, we're stuck until the next day.
Absolutely. And to explain that, the pressure and density altitude, that's what the aeroplane thinks it's performing in. And the higher the altitude it thinks it's performing in, the faster it has to go to develop the lift on the wing. So that means the takeoff speed is going to be a lot faster than normal as you would closer to sea level. And also at the altitude, your engines are not producing as much power. So it's a double penalty. You have to go faster to take off, and you've got a lot less thrust to take off. So as Robert said, there are situations where you just may not get off the runway.
Yeah. So real quick view about instruments used in the airplane, because they kind of pertain to the conversation here. First of all, the altimeter. Altimeter is basically, hey, how high above the ground are we? How does it do that? It basically measures the air pressure in relation to a reference pressure of 29.92, which is what we call our standard pressure at sea level. And it basically will measure that pressure difference and in the end basically kind of climb up. So for every 1,000 feet of elevation above sea level and standard pressure, it is 1 inch of mercury. So see this little window in the side here. So standard pressure, as I mentioned, 29.92, but it's rare that you're ever at standard pressure because we have weather. So in every aircraft, before we take off, we listen to the ATIS, which is basically a recording of the weather at that airport. And it'll tell us, for example, in the LAX right here, kind of reading from left to right, this was the weather on the 11th day of the month at 0153 Zulu. Winds were 260 at 8 knots. Visibility was greater than 10 miles, a very clear day in LAX at the time. Few clouds at 16,000 feet, a broken layer at 23,000 feet, another broken layer at 26,000 feet. Temperature was 14 Celsius, the dew point of -8. And this last one, altimeter 2988. So if I was taking off from LA at this point in time, I would set my altimeter to 29.88. And the elevation shown in the altimeter should match the actual field elevation of the airport itself. As we're flying along, we'll actually get updates en route from air traffic control, and they'll tell us, okay, local altimeter setting is, I wish we quit doing that. Local altimeter setting is 3.10. And you adjust it so that you're basically making sure that your altimeter is accurate for the region that you're flying in. If you're off, so say it's, you set it to 3.30.00, but you set it to 3,100, you're off by 1,000 feet wrong. So even a small error in this setting could be pretty important. If you think about the helicopter that crashed into the airliner out in DC, they were flying about 120 feet too high. That's a miscalculation of 0.12 on this particular altimeter. We don't know if that was the cause, but that's how even a very small error in setting this altimeter can do something very, very bad. So It's very important. If I mentioned up here, and this is something Wolfie could talk to, actually I'll let you do it. Tell us what happens above 18,000 feet.
Yeah, what Robert said was exactly right, and he's working in inches, 299 to 2 inches. That's in the USA. Most of the rest of the world works in hectopascals. So we wouldn't set 299 to 2, we would set 1,013 hectopascals. It's basically the same thing, it's just a different scale. But our aircraft has the option to switch. It's all electronic, so we basically use hectopascals flying in Australia, around Europe, but when we come to the USA, as we enter US airspace, we just flick a switch and it starts displaying things in inches. But it's the same concept. What Robert said was right. The idea of setting this value, it's actually termed QNH. The QNH is how they give it to you, QNH 29902, and that's what you set in the altimeter. Just a bit of background, the Q is just for the Q code and the NH is for nautical height. So if you set the correct value for nautical height, it's going to show you the altitude above sea level. That's where the QNH comes from. But when you're flying in a country such as the US, you've got very tall mountains, you need to have the altimeter set to give you an accurate height above sea level so that you can understand if you're going to clear the mountains. So if you know that you're flying at 14,000 feet and then the tallest mountain in the area is 13,000 feet, you know that you're going to clear it. If you don't have the altimeter set correctly, there could be a chance that you're going to run into the side of the mountain. Once you are above the highest terrain in the area, it's no longer a consideration if the altimeter is not entirely accurate. So we switch to a slightly different system where we set what's called a standard air pressure. Now, standard air pressure is 299 at 2 inches or 1,013 hectopascals. And going from a ground level up to a climb, when you pass the transition altitude, you will change the altimeters to standard. So we'll set 1013 or 299 at 2. In the US, that's 18,000 feet, because at 18,000 feet, you're not going to hit any hills. And the thing is, your actual ground sea level pressure could be quite different to 1013. So when you set 1013, the altimeter is not giving you an accurate height above sea level, but it doesn't matter at that point. You've got enough buffer between the tallest hill that it's not an issue. In Australia, for example, the transition altitude is 10,000 feet. The tallest mountain we have is Mount Kosciuszko. It's around 8,000 feet, so we can have a transition altitude. But basically, we take off out of Sydney, we pass transition altitude, we set 1013, we enter US airspace, we flick it over to 2992, it's the same value. As we're descending into wherever we go, Los Angeles or Denver, once we come down through the transition level, coming down the opposite way, we switch back to the local QNH, which we get from the ATIS, as Robert said. That's called the Automatic Terminal Information Service. We can get it on our iPads now. Aviation's changed so much in the years I've been flying. You had to get it by radio all the time. Now we can just get it on our iPads through the Wi-Fi in the aircraft. But basically it's just how the altimetry works. And flying it below your transition altitude, you're on QNH. Above transition altitude, you're on standard. And the idea of that is that all the aircraft flying at those levels are using the same datum so that they're correctly vertically separated from each other.
Is there a reminder of some type or something that tells you when to do that? My guess
we've got a checklist. Yeah, we've got a checklist that will do it. We can program in our aircraft. We can actually program in the transition altitude, the transition level, and it will give us an alert if we don't change it. So yeah, some aircraft do have a warning. It's in the checklist that we do in our climb checks. We have a transition level check, but in the FMS, when we set up coming out of Australia, we use 10,000 obviously, and as we're coming into US airspace, we adjust it to 18,000. So on the way down, if we didn't reset it, we get a little chime alerting us and a little notification on the screen. So yeah, we do definitely have a warning.
Yep. And same thing for me. I don't have all the fancy avionics that Wolfie has, but it will, even on my iPad, ForeFlight will basically pop up and say, "Hey, transition altitude," and remind you that you've got to go change something.
Yeah.
All right. So real quick, airspeed indicator. How fast are we going? So really, it's measuring the static pressure. There's a static port on the side of the aircraft where the air is typically calmest, and then you've got air ramming into the pitot tube, which is typically a little probe on the front of the wings someplace, and it measures the difference between the air being rammed into the pitot tube and the static pressure on the side of the aircraft, and measures the actual pressure to give you your indicated airspeed. So that's basically, and I say indicated, and is that it's not accurate to how fast you're going across the ground. You could be doing 200 knots across the ground, but you've got a 50 knot headwind, and now you're only going 150 knots across the ground. So it's just giving you your indicated airspeed, and there's things that affect it. The temperature. If you notice that this particular airspeed indicator, there's actually a little adjustment up here to adjust it for temperature. So there's different things that affect it to get closer to what your true airspeed, the actual speed of the aircraft going through the air, and of course ground speed being totally different. Just real quick, some of the things we see on here, this yellow arc is basically where we can put down our flaps. The green area, basically, so if I'm going faster than this, don't drop the flaps, you'll damage them. Green arc is, hey, we're safe if you get into turbulence. Yellow area is, hey, if there's turbulence, you need to kind of slow down. Otherwise, it could create more G-forces on the airplane and break it. So if you're in the yellow and you're getting turbulence, you got to slow down. And of course, a little red mark up there is never exceed speed because you don't want to rip the wings off. So real quick background on that. And I'm going a little faster here just to kind of keep us on time.
No, that's good, Robert. And the lower scale on the airspeed indicator, the lower part of the white is the stall speed with flaps, and the lower part of the green is the stall speed without flaps. And if I could just add just a very easy way to understand indicated airspeed, if you imagine you're driving a car and you put your hand out the window. Now, if you're doing 30 miles an hour, you will feel a certain amount of wind resistance. If you're doing 60 miles an hour, you're going to feel a lot more wind resistance. So you can sort of get an idea of how fast you're going by how much air you can feel on your hand. That's in simplest terms how the airspeed indicator works. It's simply measuring how much air pressure is coming in through the pitot tube. Now, to explain a little more about the difference between indicated and true airspeed, just try to imagine this. You're driving at 60 miles per hour and you feel the wind by putting your hand outside the window. Now you go up to 30,000 feet. Because the air is less than half the air pressure, if you're going at 60 miles per hour, you're not going to feel anywhere near that same amount of pressure. So to feel the same amount of pressure that you had at sea level, you might have to be doing 150 miles per hour. And that would then be a true speed of 150 miles an hour, but an indicated speed of 60 miles per hour, because that's what we're sensing as the pressure, if that makes sense.
Yep. Okay. Next one. This is an important one. This is our heading indicator, or called the directional gyro. Now, I kind of mentioned that the last line down there. None of the aircraft I fly anymore, and same definitely with Wolfie, are still using these really old style gauges. A lot of it has converted to electronics that do a lot of the work for us, but I kind of wanted to kind of bring this one up as it really kind of, the rotation of the Earth has affected it. So the directional gyro is basically a stabilized indicator of what direction the airplane is going. The actual compass down here, people ask us, like, why would you have this expensive gyro down here if you have a compass in the airplane? The problem with the compass is if it has lots of errors. If you're in turbulence, it's bouncing around. As you slow down, speed up the airplane, bank the wings, that compass is basically swinging back and forth and bouncing all over the place. So what you typically will do is periodically you will set that little knob that you're seeing here in the lower left of the gyro. You'll basically, about every, call it 15 minutes to half hours, you're flying along, and before you take off, you will adjust the heading indicator to match what the compass says. So you kind of have to hold the airplane steady for a minute, get it so it's not moving so much. It's like, okay, yeah, that's right about the 245, and then go set my directional gyro on it. Yeah. But you have to keep doing it, because over time, as you're flying along, it's kind of a combination of precession from the rotation of the Earth and a little bit of friction in the gyro. It will slowly drift. So every once in a while, you look down at it and say, "Oh man, okay, I need to readjust this thing to get it more accurate again."
Yeah, and that's very true, Robert. When you're a private pilot, you do your cross-country training. They teach you to do the clear checks. You probably heard that, the clear-off checks. So basically, every 10 to 15 minutes, you do the clear-off checks, which is compass, log, engine, altitude, radios, orientation, fuel, and future time. That was just what we used to teach when I was a flying instructor. We were teaching new pilots. They're doing the cross-countries at the PPL level. Every 10, 15 minutes, you do the clear-off checks. And the first one is C, the compass, align the compass. In smaller aircraft, that's necessary. As aircraft become more and more advanced, they have slave systems where the adjustment is made automatically. And in the aircraft I fly, we don't even have to think about it. It's just all completely done through the inertial reference systems.
Yeah, they definitely make it a lot easier. One thing I'll kind of point out real quick down here, another problem with the compass is this, this card is, we call it the compass correction card. And what they'll do is they'll take the airplane out to a compass rose. Basically, it's a painting on the tarmac of the airport that's been certified to be pointing in, north, south, east, west. And they will swing the airplane. They'll point the airplane north, and they'll look at the compass and say, oh, well, instead of pointing directly north, it's off by 3 degrees, negative 3 degrees or positive 3 degrees. And they'll do that. And what causes those errors in the compass is that the compass is typically sitting on top of the panel in the airplane above all the electronics, and all of that metal and electronics actually cause errors in the compass. So the mechanics will essentially go through and write down all the corrections. So not only do you have to look at the compass and say, oh, the compass says 245, then you got to look at it and say, oh, 245, that has an error of minus 5 degrees, and you got to go do the math in your head and say, okay, well, I'm actually off. So something we kind of have to think about, and why we hate these old mechanical compasses, is have to do all that math in your head and get it all right.
I'll be honest with you, Robert. If you told me to go and get a Cessna and fly from Eagle County down to Arizona in a Cessna VFR, I would be terrified.
Yeah. I mean, the technology has evolved so much, so we don't have to do this stuff anymore.
We have it so easy.
Yeah. But both of us started doing this.
Yeah.
All right. Next one, fun one, artificial horizon. I know Wolfie's going to talk about that a lot more later on. But what's Nathan's claim? Nathan's claim was that, and I think we have another video we might show a little bit from Dave, that if you had to correct for the curvature of the Earth, the artificial horizon would basically kind of, as you're going up the Earth, would keep pointing up and up and up and up, and it would be inaccurate and you fly off into space. That's not how the attitude indicators work. The attitude indicator is showing you your attitude of the aircraft in reference to where you are over the Earth at that particular point in time. It's not something that's versus the inertial navigation systems, which Wolfie uses, would actually spin up a gyro and figure out where you're at before you take off. And then as you're flying along for hours on end, it's basically making corrections and understanding where you are at from relation to where you took off from. That's not how the AI works. The AI is only in reference to where you're at. And it has mechanisms in the AI, things like pendulous vanes, so that if it started getting inaccurate from you again, if you flying this of the Earth, those vanes basically you will, because they're swinging in gravity. I think we'll have a video about this later on. The AI is constantly correcting itself to remain upright in relation to where you're at over the Earth. So we'll talk about this a little bit more. So it's a self-correcting gyro, and I think I'll go ahead and play this video because I think it's kind of interesting.
Sure. In this video, we're going to have a quick look at the aircraft artificial horizon. I have an entire playlist on my channel explaining how they work, but I'm still seeing flat earthers who don't seem to understand. Many of them still believe that the gyro in this instrument always remains rigid in space. They believe it is set before takeoff and that it never deviates from this original position. At the end of this video, I'm going to pose a number of questions, and I want to see if any of the flat earthers who watch these videos are able to answer them correctly. In the early part of my flying career, I was a flying instructor, and I used to instruct at a flying school that specialized in teaching aerobatics. This is the aircraft, a Robin 2160, and I think I was about 23 years old in this photograph. One of my favorite maneuvers to teach was the fully developed stable spin. In this case, we would put the aircraft into a spin, the propeller would stop due to the centrifugal forces would prevent the fuel from getting to the engine, and the aircraft would continue in the spin all the way to the ground unless we took positive recovery action. Let me show you what that maneuver looks like, and this is exactly how I used to teach it.
Okay, Chris, handing over, so when you're ready.
Single 232.
Bring the power to idle. Okay. At 60 knots, bring the stick full back and full left hard at the same time.
Yep,
Let's do it now. Yep, and full left. Hold it in, hold it this, so that's first rotation. Dipient phase, and now we can watch the airspeed, watch it stabilize, okay?
Yep.
If you let go of everything, it'll just sit there, have a look, just release everything. Leave that, okay?
Crazy.
So wait until we get to 5.5, so idle power.
Yep.
Alright, to the left, so press the right, hands on the dash and put right foot in. Put the right one in, hold it there, hold it there, hold it there. Alright.
Yep.
Now at 120 knots, just pull out. That's it, off we go. Woo. T's and P's are all green, full power, off we go again.
Now, every time we flew that maneuver, due to the high rates of rotation and the G-forces, the gyro in the artificial horizon would topple, and that means it loses its orientation. It is no longer able to provide us with useful information. It did not remain rigid in space at all. Now, the relevant part here is that after the aerobatics, when we are flying normally again, given enough time, the artificial horizon will correct itself. It will automatically realign itself so that it can provide useful information once again. On this channel, I have a number of videos demonstrating how long it takes for the artificial horizon to correct itself. Some are in real time, but many of them are time lapses, and also have a phone with a timer running to give you an indication. Let's just watch a few of those now. I'll place links to these videos in the description below. So here are my 4 questions for flat earthers. I believe they are quite straightforward, and most of us won't have any trouble answering them. Let's see how many flat earthers give us the correct answers. Question 1. Did the gyro remain rigid in space? Yes or no? You have a 50-50 chance, even with a guess. Can an artificial horizon correct itself? Again, yes or no. Question 3. This will require you to think a little. What reference is the artificial horizon using to correct itself? And question 4. Is that reference at the departure airport or at the location of the aircraft? So please post your answers in the comments below, and I will be addressing them again in a future video. Thanks for watching.
And that's actually the interesting part as well, is we could be flying along and essentially turn off all the avionics, have the airplane go dark, it'll keep flying, at least the ones I fly will keep flying. Turn it back on again even 30 minutes later, and all the AI and all the gyros will realign. So if it was based upon our starting location, that wouldn't work.
Yeah. Could you just go back to the questions, Robert? I thought I'll address that. I just posted that video yesterday as a prelude to this one. Addressing them again. Yeah, so I'll go through that. So firstly, I got a lot of responses. Most of them were from Globers, and they were basically correct. Did the gyro remain rigid in space? I think the answer is obvious. No, because it was tumbling. Can an artificial horizon correct itself? Yes, it can. I've demonstrated that. And I've got another short clip that I'll just switch to in a second, just to verify that. From one of my previous videos, it's actually referencing the manual for the artificial horizon. What reference is the artificial horizon using to correct itself? Now, we can answer this without having to use the word gravity. We can use the reference is the direction things fall. So, if you pick something up and you drop it, it's going to fall in a specific direction. That's the reference that the artificial horizon is using. And number 4, is that reference at the departure airport or at the location of the aircraft? Well, there's no way for the aircraft or the instrument to know what's happening at the departure airport. So the answer is it's happening at the location of the aircraft, because that's where the instrument is sensing the direction of down. If I can just try to share my screen.
I'll stop sharing for a moment.
Someone else is sharing, okay. All right.
Yeah, let me turn off my sharing first, so it'll let you.
This is all new to me. I'm going to off it. Okay. All right, let me try. Okay, now if I go to, this is actually one of my videos from 7 years ago, where I first started making the videos about the artificial horizon, and this is the actual operation.
We're not seeing it
yet. So
I'm not seeing anything. Okay. All right. Share. Okay.
Yep. There we go. It's come up.
Yeah, this is one of my old videos. It's the actual manual from the artificial horizon, and if we just read the highlighted areas, the electrically powered gyroscope rotor not only has the mass to create the gyroscopic effect, it has impeller blades which create airflow. This airflow from the impeller works with the gravity-actuated vanes that direct jets of air to automatically level the gyro. And I'm sorry I didn't include this in my video yesterday. I'd completely forgotten about it, but it says attitude indicators can only tolerate a specific range of bank angles. If the aircraft rolls too steeply while performing aerobatics, for example, the attitude indicator can tumble, and we saw that in the video, and become temporarily unusable. For this reason, the indicator is fitted with a cage, a device to restore the gyroscope to a level position. Now you can do that quickly, or you can just leave it and it just takes a bit longer, it will correct itself. So the RCA 26 series attitude indicators will, however, gradually re-erect back to level after a tumble. So I'll stop sharing there.
I'll take over.
So one thing I've heard back and forth, I'm not even sure the answer still. So a regular gyro that's powered, if it is spun up, let's say in Alaska, and you start heading south, is it supposed to remain rigid as it was, or does it actually adjust with gravity as well?
It's always adjusting itself. In theory, they should remain perfectly level, but in reality, they don't for so many reasons. You've got just the friction in the bearing itself. You've got the torque of the motor is inducing precession. In a future video. Thanks for watching. Any little bit of turbulence will cause the gyroscope to precess. Pilots learn something called turning and acceleration errors. Every time the airplane accelerates or turns, it's going to throw the gyro out just very slightly. The fact that there's no gyro that is just absolutely perfectly balanced, frictionless, that will remain completely rigid in space. It just doesn't happen. There's just physical errors in the instrument. So the idea of the pendulous vanes are to continuously correct errors. And one of the arguments that flat earthers threw up in the early days was that how do you know it's correcting for curvature? Well, it doesn't matter because the gyro doesn't care. The gyro doesn't care what produced the error. The gyro simply corrects for the error. So if you're flying around the Earth and we fly 60 nautical miles, that's going to be 1 degree of attitude change. That's going to be sensed in the gyro as a 1 degree error, and the vanes will be correcting it. But it doesn't sort of do it in steps. It's doing it continuously over that 60 nautical miles,
Gotcha.
which could take several minutes to fly. So the corrections are being made at the sub fraction of a degree level, and that's why they're imperceptible to the pilot.
Yeah. All right, one of our last basic slides here. This aircraft is a DA-40. It's actually very similar to the one I fly, but probably a couple of years newer. But see, it's a lot more modern with the glass cockpits. You'll notice you still have the round gauges up on top, primarily as backups in case the computers were to fail. But this is a real basic things. I got rudders down there at my feet to control the yaw. So that's basically kind of the left and right twist of the aircraft. The control stick in the middle is your bank, turning the airplane left and right, and your elevator, which is basically going up and down. Throttle, of course. Flaps, which basically, we lower them down, it adds kind of wing or cord to the wing to give us so we can get more lift at slower speeds. But the more important one down here is trim. And we'll talk about trim when we talk about why the aircraft will follow the shape of the Earth. But essentially, we get up to altitude. There's different phases of how we use trim. But trim is basically to, let's say I take off, I'm climbing at, say, 70 knots. I can essentially trim the aircraft to maintain that 70 knots at, say, a 5 degree climb angle, let go of the stick, and the airplane will keep climbing. Once I get up to altitude, I'll push the nose over, maybe say I'm at 10,000 feet. I'll trim the aircraft so to maintain that. But as I accelerate, now I'm going faster. That means I've got more lift. The airplane's going to want to climb a little bit more, so I'll dial in a little bit more trim. And it takes a couple of times until you get to the point that, I'm at my desired cruise speed, I'm at my desired altitude. I've trimmed all the pressure away, so the aircraft will just maintain that elevation. If it's a calm day and there's not much turbulence, you can essentially set that thing, and the airplane will just continue to fly along at that elevation without any input from the pilot. It's what we're essentially setting it for is, I'm just going to throw a number out there, but say I'm at 10,000 feet, the air pressure level at 10,000 feet is, say, 12 millibars. I'm just throwing a number out there. So that pressure level at 10,000 feet is going to be the same as it kind of follows the curvature of the Earth. So I've calibrated the airplane, say, I want you to maintain yourself at that pressure level, and that pressure level is going to stay consistent unless you fly through an area that maybe the weather's changed. So that's something as we're flying along, you fly through a cold front. Now the air pressure has gotten lower, so now I'm going to have to retrim the airplane for that lower air pressure. Same thing if I go into a high pressure area. So as we're flying along, you kind of have to make corrections for the differences in air pressure from weather. But generally, you could fly hands off and let the airplane just kind of keep going. One of the things I think we're going to jump in that my instructor trained me is you can get the airplane trimmed where you want it, kind of pull the stick back to make yourself climb a couple hundred feet, let go, and the airplane will naturally bring itself back down and stabilize it where you started from.
Yeah, absolutely. If I could go in on top of that, when you're trimming the airplane, you're basically setting it up so that you can let go of the elevator, so that you don't need to hold the nose in a particular area to maintain altitude. And that's dependent upon the power being consistent and the weight of the aircraft being consistent. Now, if you imagine, as Robert said, you're at 10,000 feet, you've got power set at, say, 90% thrust, you're leaving it there, you've got the airplane trimmed now so it's flying nice and level. If anything caused that aircraft to go up slightly, maybe a bit of turbulence, as soon as it goes up, it's going into thinner air. So there's going to be less thrust, there's going to be less lift, and the airplane will then slow down. Now, the whole idea behind aircraft stability is that it will try to maintain the speed that it is trimmed for. So as you go up, it's going to slow down. The natural aerodynamics of the aircraft will then cause the nose to drop by itself to regain that speed. And it's then going to drop down. As it drops down, it's accelerating. And when it reaches that trimmed speed, it's going to stabilize. So, yeah, what Robert said was correct. If you pull it up and let go, it's going to climb, slow down, automatically drop the nose and regain the desired altitude. And the same applies if you push forward on the stick. The aircraft will pick up speed. That's going to give you more lift. You're going into thicker air below, generating more thrust and more lift. So the airplane will naturally pitch up to try and regain that trimmed airspeed.
Yep. This next slide is kind of fun in that I want to show a couple examples of pitch not necessarily always being tied to the airplane going up or down. Right. Every aircraft's a bit different. The kind of desired pitch altitude as you're flying along really depends upon the aircraft. And what you're trying to find is the most efficient pitch to get the most amount of lift, the least amount of drag. And that can vary depending upon your airspeed, your weight. I mean, there's many different parameters that go into that. But I want to show a couple examples here. The first one on the left is an F-18 doing a slow speed flyby. And I'll go ahead and fire it. Essentially, he's coming in at a very, very high angle of attack. But he's also flying very, very slow. Notice his nose is sticking way up in the air, but he's not climbing. He's maintaining his altitude. He's doing the flyby. We'll take another one. Here we have an airliner coming in to land. He's coming in with a positive angle of attack, but yet he's still descending to come in and land. Here he is. He's going to flare, which basically means he's going to pull the nose up even higher as the wheels start to touch down. And yet he's still descending, and now that his wheels are on the ground, he brings the nose down. That's the so it's not just a simple thing of, you know, the aircraft is flying for 6 miles across the ocean, maintaining a 2-degree pitch angle, and they'd have to push the nose over to have it go down. There's that relationship doesn't exist. I think Whoopi's going to go into a lot more detail about that in just a little bit. But this is a couple of cool videos that do that.
Yeah, definitely. And that F-18 one's always impressive. And it was at such a high nose attitude because it was flying slow. So the wing had to be deflecting a lot more air. That's why the angle of attack was increased. But in that particular scenario, a lot of the weight of the aircraft was being supported by the thrust of the engines too, because of the nose attitude. But yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you want me to go into the pitch data now, Robert, or you've got more you want to say.
Yeah, that's it. That's the end of the slides, and now it's let you go into details.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen again.
Let me stop sharing real fast. Okay. There you go.
Okay, let me try. Let's see, I'll get it right this time. Share, and I'll go back to that one. We'll expand that, and it is which one? That one there. Now, I'm sure we're all familiar with Walter Bislin. Walter is just phenomenal in how he can put these programs together, but this is one he created a number of years ago, and it shows how the aircraft is able to maintain altitude and maintain a constant pitch attitude as it's following curvature. Can you see that before I play anything?
Yep.
We can all see it? Okay.
We see it.
Yeah, so the important thing that the mistake that flat earthers make with the pitch data is assuming that the reference for the pitch data is the starting point. Okay, so they're assuming where the airplane pitch data is originating from, that datum doesn't change, but that's not how it works on the globe. On the globe, the direction of down changes as we fly around curvature. So if we fly around 5 degrees of Earth curvature, the direction of down is now 5 degrees different. And the horizontal is the datum from which this pitch data is being measured, and horizontal is 90 degrees to the direction of down. So as we follow Earth curvature, the direction of down is changing, which means the direction of horizontal is changing, and we can keep a constant pitch attitude. Can you see my mouse moving there?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You can? Okay. So that angle there, that one there is horizontal, which is 90 degrees to vertical. And this one here is the nose attitude of the aircraft. So that would be the pitch attitude. Let's say that's 5 degrees. I'm just going to play this video and you'll see that the aeroplane is recording this pitch data in the flight manual, or the black box, you could say. It's recording the pitch data. It's measuring the angle between the nose attitude of the aircraft and horizontal. Okay. As we play the video, you can see that pitch angle is not changing. It's going around curve quite nicely, but because the direction of vertical is changing, the direction of horizontal is changing, the actual pitch angle is not changing, and yet we can see the aeroplane is following curvature. So I've been saying this for a very long time. The pitch data on a globe is going to be the same as what it would be on a flat Earth anyway. It's going to show a constant level of pitch as you're following around the curvature. So the mistake being made by flat earthers believing pitch data should show a continual nose down is they're not understanding what the reference is for this pitch data. The reference is the position of the aircraft and the direction of down at the position of the aircraft, and on the globe model, that direction changes as you fly around curvature. So it's absolutely logical that the pitch data should be consistent, even when you're following curve. It shouldn't show actual nose pitching down. When you're viewing it from an external reference point, which is how they usually demonstrate it, yeah, it looks like the aeroplane is pitching down, but the pitch data is actually being measured from this horizontal, which is always at 90 degrees to the vertical. Okay, I'll stop sharing that.
Very good, very good.
Does that make sense, Jerry? I'm trying to explain
Absolutely.
it.
No, I've been trying to explain, the idea of how we build on a globe Earth, and how we can build bridges, and we can use railroads, and we can do canals, and I think that's a big disconnect with where I was as a flat earther and where flat earthers are. They still want to ask questions about a canal, and they want to say a canal drops, this many miles by the time you get to the end of it. But when we build a canal, it's kind of like the plane, same thing, right? It's adjusting everywhere you're moving, and so you're always building on a level ground, or building level. You use a level to get your level, and then you're just moving so little at a time. And that's, I think, that people don't grasp the size of the Earth. We think of.
I saw your video on that, Jaron, where you had GeoGebra.
Yeah, GeoGebra, yeah.
Fantastic. And I thought, wow, that's just really, really well explained. You definitely have a really good way of explaining things.
Yeah, it's just when it comes to me, sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, I get it, because I think we think baseball, basketball, yoga ball, beach ball, and so the idea of the ball is so big that it's actually flat is kind of hard to fathom until you really think about it, and you kind of then start to see, oh, okay, I get it, that if we, that's why they make fun of me with the Home Depot example, but the Home Depot it's level. We could build a Home Depot and it's level, and we build one next to it and it's level, and we build one next to it and it's level, and we could go all the way around the Earth and come back, and we never did anything different, and the level was always level.
The difference is so small from one to the next, yeah. And I think so when flat earthers say that the pitch data should show the aircraft continually pitching down, that's actually a straw man, because no globe believes that. That's a complete straw man. That's not how it would work on the globe. And on the globe, because the direction of down is changing, pitch data is going to be constant, and that's what we see.
Right. And if it did nose down, you're more than likely going to lose altitude, which is not what it's trying to do.
Absolutely. Yep. 100%.
Robert, do you have anything else to share? You want me to go to questions? What do you want to do?
I actually think we're going to go into a bit of navigation now.
Good.
Wolfie's going to lead that.
Okay. One of my favorite questions that I've been asking for a long time, and it's a bit of a checkmate because I never get an answer, is can you show me an alternative to the globe for flight planning? Now, I've been flying since 1981, so what's that, 45 years? And basically, here's a little calculator that I've got. Let me just share the screen again.
Yeah, sure. There you
go. That one. Share. Can you see that Excel spreadsheet?
Yep,
we got it.
Yeah. Okay, so this is just using basic spherical trigonometry. Now, I created this one specifically when I started talking to flat earthers because, the calculations that we use can be based on a perfect circle, and we use the Haversine equation. So I've got the latitude and longitude inputs going here, and then it gives you the distance on a perfect sphere or the spheroid, the Earth spheroid. And the radius of the sphere is 6371 kilometers, but if we go down here to the spheroid calculations, it's a slightly different equatorial radius, and then here we have the flattening ratio, which is about 1/298. So we can put in any latitude and longitude that we want, and it will give us the distance for a sphere, the distance for the spheroid, which is more accurate. But importantly, it shows you the difference, and it's tiny in most cases. It's only 0.21% there. So you could put in, let's say, -30, and let's say 150 degrees east, and we're going to go to north 15 and -17. So that's quite a long distance. Pop that in. It's a distance of 6,583 kilometers on a perfect sphere, 6,572 kilometers on the spheroid. Now, when it comes to flight planning, believe it or not, that difference is just insignificant, because if we were flying that distance, that 0.23% is, what is it? Only 16 kilometers difference. Now that's literally just 2 minutes of flying time. On a flight plan, we would have several dozen waypoints between these two locations, and on the flight plan, the waypoints are rounded up or down to the nearest mile anyway, and your ETIs are rounded up or down to the nearest minute. When you're flying, you only have to update your ETA to air traffic control if you deviate by more than 2 minutes. So if I produced a flight plan using a perfect sphere and I flew that one, the difference would be so insignificant that it would basically, how it would present to me in flight is the aircraft flight management system would show a wind value that was just very slightly different to reality. And that would compensate for that 16 kilometers over 14 hours of flying, because each time you hit a waypoint, you're now reconfirming your position. So the progressive error becomes less and less and less. And, a few minutes here or there is just completely absorbed by the updates of the ETA. But if we look at the mathematics for it, if I click on that one there, up here is basically an equation that takes the latitude and longitude of the first location, the latitude, longitude of the second, and it measures the angle between those 2 points on a ball from the center of the ball, and it measures it in radians. And then we have to know the radius of the Earth to convert it to a distance. And here you can see E9. Can you see that there?
Yep.
E9. That's cell E9. That's the spherical radius of the Earth. So this equation is calculating for a ball, and the final piece of the puzzle is how big is the ball. The ball has a radius of 6371 kilometers. That's how it knows what distance to give us. This one here is a bit more advanced, but it does the same thing. However, it's using the exact oblateness of the Earth to come up with a more precise figure. Now, when you use commercial flight planning systems, such as my 4Flight application, it's calculating on a spheroid. But I must admit, in the early days of my flying, the flight planning equations I was just using a perfect sphere. And, that tiny 0.23% difference made absolutely no difference in the scheme of things. But now, if you go and ask a flat earther, give me something like this without using the globe. So produce a calculator that I can enter any latitude and longitude on the Earth and go to another one, and it's going to give me an accurate distance, but do it without relying on the globe. And of course, it's impossible. It can't be done.
Well, Stephen Alonso could steal it and then say that we predicted it.
Yeah, I don't know. You're obviously familiar with Ruhif. Ruhif had a look at his math, and he put together a spreadsheet based on Stephen Alonso's math, and it was cherry-picked, and it was fudged to match those particular routes so that the numbers looked like they were correct. But when you applied his mathematics to other airports, and I used Sydney Airport and Bankstown Airport, they're only 10 miles apart in reality. Now, if I put those coordinates in here, it would show 10 nautical miles. But when we did it with Stephen Alonso's math, it was like 230 miles. So it just failed straight away.
Imagine that.
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, I might just share one more thing, and then I think we'll go in the Q&A. This is I find Zoom. Yeah, where'd it go? There it is. Wanted to kind of show real quick kind of a difference in some of the technology again that we're kind of looking at. This is actually a website, vfrmap.com. You can basically go pull up our old traditional charts that we used to use. I think everybody's seen the airline pilot going to the airport. He's got a big leather suitcase pulling behind him, and that was all of his paper charts that he had to carry for all of the flights that he could be doing during the day. I used to work for a company called Jeppesen, and they were one of the largest producers of aviation navigation materials in the world, and they had the biggest printing plant in the world for these charts. At one point in time, they were the largest U.S. Postal Service customer in the country by the amount of charts that they had to send out. And every 45 days, the approach charts would, not every single one would change, but say 2% of the charts changed. We'd send out the updated charts to them, and the pilots would sit there for hours on end, pulling out the old paper chart and putting in a new paper chart. So it was a relative nightmare having to carry around all that paper. This is what we're looking at here is kind of in the Texas area. This is Laughlin Air Force Base. What's this? San Antonio down here. So this is kind of what we used to navigate by. One of the things I kind of wanted to point out, if I can find it again, I just lost it, is the magnetic correction that we'd have to do. I think everybody understands the magnetic North Pole is not the same as the actual physical geographic North Pole. And darn it, now I'm not finding it. Maybe not be zoomed in far enough here. But on the chart, there actually is a correction vector. What it is? Come on, show me. There we go. So if we're in this area of the chart, we actually have to make a 6-degree correction to the east to make a correction for the magnetic pole not being the same as the actual pole. And this varies upon where you're at in the country. So there's some of the things that we'd have to look at. And these charts were kind of fun. Or typically, once you unfold them, we're about 5 to 6 feet wide. So you can imagine being in a little tiny airplane like the one I fly, and you fly off one edge of the chart, and you got to flip it over and find it where on the other side. So you're basically playing chart origami in the middle of the airplane, trying to figure out where you're at. Luckily, that time is gone. So this here is for flight, same thing that Wolfie uses. I've got on my iPad pretty much all the charts for the majority of the world stored on this thing. I've got quite a bit of storage in. I can download all the charts. So we're looking at the exact same information. It did go into dark mode because it is so late. But I can zoom all the way in on that airport. I don't have charts for Laughlin. Let me go over to San Antonio here. That's a military base. They're like, we don't want to show you details. There's San Antonio over here. There we go. So let's start zooming in on the airport in San Antonio. Oh, I gotta go to the wrong mode here. Let me turn off the sectional. There we go. So now I go all the way down and see individual details on the airport. I can leave my sectional up and see all the stuff I need. I can bring up IFR charts, which is basically if we're flying by instruments. So all of these charts are all available to me on my iPad versus having an entire suitcase full of charts. We can plan in our flight plans. As an example, I actually plan the flight plan up here from Sydney to Santiago. So if I zoom way out here, I'm going to turn off the chart so I can show it kind of this way. Yeah, if I come over here we are. I can zoom way into Sydney. There's all my airport information about the airport. And it actually is plotting the shortest path, which is 6,135 nautical miles. Notice it says 52 hours. That's because it's set to my little airplane and not Whoopi's airplane. But you would program the correct type of airplane. And as I continue to zoom out, oh, wow, that looks like we're actually flying over a globe. So that is the shortest path from Sydney to Santiago. Now, keep in mind, there are variations. There could be a slight variation for weather. If the aircraft needs to maintain different standards for staying close to land, they may alter it. But if you go look at the QF23 and 28 flights, this is generally the path that they're taking.
And they also might adjust that flight path. They might adjust it with the winds aloft too, right?
Correct. Yeah. If they find, especially elevations, you may find that you've got 20 knot less headwind by flying 2,000 feet lower. So you'll make corrections to that in flight. to find the most efficient route.
Correct. Yeah. But you're using a slightly different map to how I use it on, but the one I've got also shows the position of daylight and darkness. It's just in the settings at the top, the aeronautical map. Yeah.
And you're probably using more like IFR high charts and
definitely.
Yeah. I don't think I have those downloaded. I never use those. I don't go that high.
But when I first started doing international flying, what you said about doing amendments, it would be a whole day at the airport. The amendments would arrive and I'd go to the airport. I'd be at the aeroplane the whole day, updating the approach charts, updating all the en route charts, and just checking and verifying and signing it all off. Now with the iPad, that's all gone, and I literally, when I'm in the taxi on the way to the plane for a flight, I just hit the update button. And within a few minutes, the ForeFlight is updated with all the current charts. It has made life just unbelievably more easy. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and a lot cheaper. We used to have to go, spend $40. I mean, for me, I'm playing local stuff. I'd spend $40 a month on updated charts. It was really annoying, and now it's I pay for the software, but I just click download, and it downloads everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And the ForeFlight can overlay the winds. If I could just share my screen just briefly again. I'll just play my little clip on that one. I'll just play that one. That's just a little demo I made. Same sort of thing, but as you can see there, it's a different map. You zoom right into Sydney, it shows you all the taxiways, and when you're actually flying, it's linked to the GPS, so you actually see your aircraft moving on this map, so you can actually taxi on the taxiways just using the ForeFlight app. There's the day and the night when I recorded the video. Going into San Diego, zooming in, and again, you can see all the taxiways.
I purposely turned off, we call it own ship, where it basically shows you at, and I purposely turned it off on mine. Because it will show you on the live display exactly where I'm at right now, so I turned that off.
I'll turn on the winds, I think.
Give away where I'm at.
I'll turn on the winds, or maybe I'll turn on the wind speeds. So now it starts to overlay those winds. And over on the right-hand side, you can see that's at 44,000 feet. So you can actually select the altitude that you want to see the winds. So that's kind of showing the current winds around the whole Earth. It's just unbelievable the amount of situational awareness that ForeFlight gives you when you're flying. And the other thing I just put on is the North Atlantic tracks and the Pacific tracks, just to show you how much information is available here. This is the organised track system. The busiest airspace in the world is between North America and Europe, just as it's coming into view there. They have a North Atlantic track system which changes every day. You've got specified tracks going east, and then you have specified tracks coming west. But I just can't explain how much easier it has made life for pilots to have an app like this. It's fantastic.
Yep.
Yeah, and then the approach charts. We've got all our Jefferson charts. These were all paper charts, but now they're all just linked to your route. So it's automatically put in Sydney and San Diego charts, and we can just click the relevant instrument approach chart, and it's all there. And again, it's geotagged, so it's showing your own ship on these charts as you're flying down. You can actually see yourself moving on the chart. Just incredible technology.
All right, Jaron. I think that's we can probably open it for Q&A.
Beautiful. I was seeing some random comments in the chat that I wanted to comment on, a couple of them. Someone said you need to be a retard to go back to the globe. So you can actually know by tonight, if you wanted to, that you live on a globe by just taking your elevation angle to Polaris. For me, it's 37. If I drive 69 miles north on a line of longitude, which is a north-south great circle, then in 69 miles, I'll be at 38 degrees north. And then if I do it again, 69 more miles, I'll be at 39 degrees. You can call a friend in China or India or Japan, wherever you want. Have them do the same thing. How many times do you need to do that until you realize that 360 degrees times 69 miles is the circumference of the Earth? So you're not going to be able to do that on any flat map ever. And so it's not being retarded. It's just simply you were retarded and then you figured it all out. So it's actually the opposite of what you said. Go ahead.
No, I agree, Jaron. And my question would be to that person, just show me an alternative to the globe for flight planning that can calculate distances without relying on the globe. And, they're completely cornered at that point.
Yeah, and if Flat Earth was ever going to take over the globe, it would just need to explain the world better than the globe does. And considering that they have no sun now, they have two suns, they've got multiple suns, apparent suns, they can't explain the south at all, south celestial pole, the south pole, can't explain a circling sun in the south. That tells you that you'll never better explain the Earth than the globe. So your attempts are futile at this point. And showing up in debates and saying, I don't have a model, I don't make claims, is just silly, and everybody else sees it that way. So I wish I could get that across to those people, because it's sad to see them continue down this road. And you just know, once you're in this position, you're like, oh man, there's nothing at the end of that road but misery. And I actually remember you telling me that, Wolfie. I remember one time we talked and you kind of said, there's nothing at the end of this road for you. Yeah. And I spent 10 years learning that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm super impressed, and I really am. I was skeptical, and that was my mistake. I was too skeptical. But, you went down there, you saw things with your own eyes, and you can't deny evidence when you see it with your own eyes. And as I said in my apology video, I'm super impressed, and you have gained my respect, for being honest enough to accept what you saw. And, probably the hardest thing, I know it would be hard for me to admit I was wrong, but you had the courage and the conviction to do that. So, yeah, massive respect.
Well, thank you. I wish that other people would, because they listen to me so much for 10 years, and then you think, they'll just listen to me again. But now they only listen to you when you are telling them about the flat Earth, right? If you try and say something different, then they don't want to listen to you anymore. So real quick, just showing this is what Wolfie was talking about. I've been showing on my show just with GeoGebra that, the Earth is a sphere, but I know flat earthers always say, yeah, but it's measured flat and water lies flat. Well, yeah, when we zoom in here, you'll see that every part of the Earth is the same as this too. It doesn't change. If you get way down in here, you're going to see, here's the Burj Khalifa. Get in there even further, you're going to see that we've got a man standing here at the very, so you see that this is why water lies level. Look at this. This is a spa size. Here's a man who's 6 foot tall. And you would just see that is exactly what this pool would do. The pool would lie flat and level. And so I figured out the curvature on 660 feet, which is 2 football fields end to end, right? And that's only 1/8 inch of curve. So imagine being in the ocean, looking in front of you at these 2 football fields, which are 660 feet. That's 1/8 inch of curve that you'll never see. It's 2 nickels stacked on top of each other. And if you take those 2 and then move to the next 2, this is what I don't think people understand, that it would be the same. 1/8 inch of curve. Now go to the next 2. It's 1/8 inch of curve. So, same thing with building bridges. You would just build a bridge over the water where it's flat and level. And again, that's what I think people don't understand.
Yeah. Somebody asked a question a little bit earlier, Wolfie, about they wanted you to talk about INS, I guess now IRS, how they work.
Basically, it's a ring laser gyro, and it's tied into a flight management system. Basically, when you power it up, it is sensing the rotation of the Earth, and from that it can determine its latitude. Now, we also have 2 GNSS units, which are GPS basically, but they have the improved accuracy that comes from the Wide Area Augmentation System, which is essentially another satellite. And the GPS is constantly providing the most accurate information to the flight management system. When we first initialize the inertial reference system, we feed them the location from the GPS, and from that point onwards, they determine their own location just by sensing the movement. It's like, it still blows me away, the technology that it's sensing every little minor acceleration that occurs within the aircraft, and from that determining the direction, the speed, and we can fly for 12 hours and the inertial navigation system is still within a few miles of our actual true position. The whole time the airplane is navigating through GPS, but if for any reason we lost GPS, and there's a lot of spoofing that occurs now in Europe where either the GPS is blocked or it's provided with false information, and we have 3 inertial reference systems on the aircraft. We actually disable the GPS on the 3rd one, so that if we did lose the GPS, we realize we had a spoofing incident, we can switch to IRS-3, which is going to provide us with its own completely self-contained navigation based on the starting point and based on sensing what the airplane has been doing. And it's going to be accurate within a few miles. Now, that sounds pretty terrible if you're driving a car, but if you're flying across the Pacific Ocean, 3 or 4 miles or even 10 miles of inaccuracy is not that big a deal, because, as you're approaching, say, the west coast of the USA, you're going to pick up radio beacons. You've got Los Angeles, you've got Santa Monica, you've got all those Long Beach airports. Each of them have radio beacons called DME, which is a distance measuring equipment, and VOR, which gives you the angle that you are from that airport. And as soon as the aeroplane is able to detect those, it uses them, and it's just constantly monitoring all the beacons and DMEs that it can see within its range and determining its own position again. So basically, we could fly anywhere in the world without using GPS. GPS is the most accurate, most reliable, extremely precise. But if we lost that, we still kind of go back to the older systems where we can still fly quite safely and comfortably across the Pacific. 10 nautical miles of inaccuracy would be sort of the maximum. That's just a couple of minutes flying time, and as soon as you got within range of the West Coast, you're picking up the frequencies of the radio beacons. The aeroplane will be able to accurately determine its position once again.
Somebody asked me a question here on Telegram. They want to know, is all the news that's been coming out about issues with planes, is that just a news cycle? As pilots, are you worried at all about the issues going on with planes, or is it just a news cycle that'll come and go?
You're talking about the GPS spoofing?
No, this is just
all the accidents happening recently
in general.
Look, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's a tragic thing. I don't know if there's like an underlying cause why they're all happening, or if it's just a coincidence. But yeah, unfortunately, it's been higher than average lately.
Yeah, and I thought an interesting stat the other day, especially around the Reagan crash. That was the first mid-air collision at Reagan ever.
Wow.
So if you think about the odds, they've had a pretty good record of that never happening before. And so certainly when you do get in a cycle where aircraft crashes are happening, every little crash that happens, every little incident, every little close call will then get reported. So, I mean, close calls happen all the time, but now it's the news cycle is really sensitive about it, so they're going to report on everything.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my question to you guys would be, I would like to hear one story of probably the most you were ever afraid, Wolfie.
Oh, I can give you that one easily. There's one that I nearly died. Basically, it was a long time before I was working for my current company. I was still with the New South Wales Police as my full-time job, but I was doing a lot of contract work, just flying aeroplanes. And on this particular one, we were ferrying a small jet from Australia to Houston in the USA to be sold. It was in Australia and it was being sold in the USA. Because of the range, it could not go from Hawaii to the West Coast. So it didn't have the range to do that. So we had to plot a route up through the Pacific, up through Alaska, and then down through Canada, back down that way. But basically, we went out of Sydney, we went up to Brisbane, Cairns, went across to Midway, Island Midway. From Midway, and that was fantastic, landing at Midway Airport. There was just like over 1 million birds, seagulls there. And, you had to time your departure and arrival time to the early hours of the morning, otherwise you're going to hit birds. But anyway, we went out of Midway aiming to land in Adak, Alaska. And we only had enough fuel to get there. And at that time, the weather forecasting was not that great, and the type of instrument approach in Adak was not going to let us get below about 1,200 feet. So it wasn't a very good instrument approach. So we plan out of Midway with what we call a point of no return. And the point of no return means we can go that far and then turn around and go back to Midway. But once you go beyond the point of no return, you have to keep going. So we were watching the weather very closely, and it was all sounding okay. It looks okay. We got to the PNR. The weather was okay. It was just above the height of the instrument approach. So we thought, okay, we're going to continue. And you wouldn't believe it, within half an hour, we start getting reports that the weather was deteriorating rapidly. So it was starting to get very stressful. It basically meant that when we get to Adak, the weather was too bad to land. So we had to start thinking about other options. And what we ended up doing was diverting to a place called Shemya, which is a military base that was a bit to the west of Adak, and that had an instrument landing system which lets us get down much lower. So it lets us get down to 200 feet above the ground if we fly that approach. But what we were hearing, so we declared an emergency. It's about the only time I've ever declared an emergency. I was the co-pilot. I was with a much older captain, and we declared an emergency and we were diverting to Shemya. We were looking at the fuel. It was just extremely tight. And basically we had one shot at the approach, and we were hearing reports that a C-130 Hercules out of Anchorage had tried to get into Shemya earlier the morning and was unable to. So they returned back to Anchorage. So we had one shot and the weather was just absolutely atrocious. So the captain asked me to fly the approach, and that was the right thing to do. I was flying the approach and he was just watching outside, and literally we did not see the runway until we were about maybe 30 feet off the ground. He landed, everything was fine. When we refilled the aircraft, we had 200 pounds of fuel left, which would not have been enough to do a go around. So literally it was do or die, that particular one. Wow. And in hindsight, I think, wow, that was really frightening, and it was a good lesson that I always put extra fuel on board every single flight now. Yeah.
Wow. And Robert, you have a story?
Mine's not as exciting, but I was out flying with a friend of mine, and we're coming back into land, and it was nighttime. We were probably about 9 o'clock at night, and I was kind of coming around to the east side of the airport, circling kind of counterclockwise around the airport to land from the east, and all of a sudden, these lights light up in front of me, maybe a mile in front of me. And the air traffic controller, who was a trainee, had put me head to head with a King Air. So I see him when he turns his lights on maybe a mile or two in front of me with a closure rate of probably over 250 knots. And all I could do was I quickly veered left to get out of his way, went into a military airspace, called up tower, said, hey, this is what happened. The girl was incredibly apologetic and she put us on a mid-air collision, called the military base, said, hey, this is what happens. Oh, but it's a scenario where all of our lives were at risk. The pilot can do absolutely anything they need to do to eliminate that risk, including flying in the military airspace. So absolutely nothing came of it. But it's the prerogative of a pilot that if you can do anything you need to do to save your life.
Yeah.
Oh, pretty incredible. I just heard a story recently about, I didn't even know that planes land and take off from the same runway. I thought that they would be separate, and they were talking about having a guy go around because planes kept taking off when he was supposed to land. I didn't even know that happened. So it must be crazy to be an air traffic controller. Can't even imagine.
Yeah, the air traffic controllers in the US are fantastic. Like we fly into Perth all the time. Perth is an isolated city, not a great deal of air traffic, and they're always speeding us up, slowing us down, speeding us up, slowing us down. In the US, you've got airspace which is far more busy, and it doesn't seem to be any problem. But the best air traffic controllers in Australia are at Essendon, and that's for Ben. Yeah.
All right, we got some super chats here. If you guys want to send those in, we'll try to get the other ones too, but we only got about 15 minutes or so. Dave's Waffle House, thank you very much for $1.99, £1.99. We've got Mr. Zero or X Mr. Zero X. $20, thank you very much. Says, hey, Jaron, here because McToon, MC Toon told me he'd give me cookies. All right. Do you provide the cookies? I do not. Is milk involved? It is not. But seriously, wanted to show some love and respect. Keep using them brain meats. Hey, Wolfie. Hey, Robert. We've got Zoomy, Tomato, thank you very much, $2. Says, I'm here because Toon said there'd be cake. Man, cake, cookies, all kinds of stuff. Liverpool Dude says, does Wolfie still fly RC planes?
Not that often. I've still got them. I've got drones, which I fly with my daughter occasionally. I do want to get my daughter into the RC planes at some point. We'll start off with a glider, but no, it's something I haven't done for a long time. Yeah.
Okay, we got Alysm, ALYSM, $5 says, I wonder where all the flat Earth pilots are that I keep hearing about. Weird that whenever there is a flat Earth pilot, they struggle with RPL level knowledge. Yeah, well, the last one I heard about turned out to be a fraud. So,
actually, a great point is Nathan went up on a little Cessna 172 the other day to take some infrared pictures from the airplane, and he claimed the guy was a flat Earth pilot. So we asked him. In fact, many people asked him, like, "Great, bring him along, make him your partner." Nothing.
Oh, so the claim was the guy flying with him was a flat Earth pilot?
That's what he claimed, but did he bring him on to this debate? Nope. I think we've met one actual flat Earth pilot, Quincy Carr, who is a disabled flight instructor out in California. He's basically at my level. He's a private pilot, but he's able to teach the kind of the basic levels of flying to get people through private pilot. And he's was disabled in a shooting, so it's kind of a really sad story. He was going to be an airline pilot. But But yeah, he was claiming for a long time that he was a flat earther, and I'd actually debated him. But he's kind of gone dark now because I think he realized that it wasn't working out for him.
Makes sense. All right, we've got Marcus Leach says the science community is proud of you, Jaron. Oh, that's awesome. At least somebody is. All right, we've got. Let me just go back to Q&A here and see if there's any in there. And I appreciate you guys being here, though, coming on. Despite somebody asked me my opinion of Nathan. I mean, again, you guys know my Debatism show. How many people have been on the Debatism show? I've never had anybody ask for money or never have offered anybody money. So the fact that he at first asked for $200, I thought, well, there's no way these guys are going to pay. And when I told them, they were interested enough to say, okay, we want to pay, but we just don't want him to not show up, or we don't want him to show up and then not answer easy questions or questions that we are posing to him. So they said, can we give it to you? Give him $50 just for saying yes, and then $150 if he just doesn't run away and shows up. So to me, that is a totally fair deal. It's actually, like I said, more money than I've seen anybody ask for or make. And then to demand that it gets paid first, and he said, it has to be in my account by tomorrow at this time. I don't think he's in a place to be demanding money for a debate. So that's my opinion. I think he should have been here. Just if you're sure enough about your position, then you should be able to have a conversation about it. It didn't have to be a debate, too. We said just a conversation so that these guys can address some things that he said that they disagree with or find false. So that's my opinion there. Let me go in here and see if there's any. Oops, I need to go to Q&A.
Actually, while you're looking at that, one thing I thought was really funny is Nathan kept telling people that Wolfie and I were too broke to afford $200, which I thought was pretty humorous coming from a grifter who travels from place to place, checking up on people's couches, driving a rental RV, begging money from people all day long, and he said, we don't have any money. I thought that was pretty funny.
Wow.
No, and I sent it to Jaron today, and Jaron can confirm that.
Yep, it's here. We have Japugli says, if you're a commercial pilot, how often do you come across flat earthers during your flights? Either one of you consider yourselves that? Or have
keep in mind that I'm a private pilot, so I don't do it, and Whoopi's a corporate pilot, so he's not dealing with airlines and people walking up to him.
My guess is that
we don't fly just regular passengers off the street. We're just sort of kind of flying people within the same company. Yeah.
Right. Joseph M says, how high before you crash into the dome? Obviously, that's somebody joking around. Industrial Nerd says, ready for the smackdown. Somebody says, at what height could one easily or feasibly see the curvature of the Earth with the naked eye?
Well, I can see it from 45,000 feet. Now, having said that, it's not every single time because it depends on your visibility. And, if you're above clouds and you've got poor visibility, you won't see the horizon. But there are occasions when you're flying over the ocean, you just past the sunset, just on dusk, and you have a very clear, crisp horizon. It's unmistakable. It's very small, but that's what it's supposed to be from that altitude. And I've got a couple of videos, and Walter Bislin has done a lot of analysis on the footage from these videos and from my photographs, overlaying it with the exact expectation of what it should look like. And lo and behold, it matches perfectly right down to the gap between horizontal and the horizon, the exact degrees. It just matches perfectly. So, yeah, look, people say it's a dodgy camera or it's the curvature of the window, but I've shown in other videos, looking through the window, looking at straight panels inside the hangar. There's no artificial curvature produced by that window at all.
Okay, somebody says, do you think he would have actually not shown up if you gave him the money up front? Oh, that wasn't really the concern. More it was the aloofness or just the general, the nature of it. I mean, do you pay your appliance repair guy before he comes to the house? No, because that wouldn't make much sense. Then he could come by and not fix it and just be like, thanks for the money. So that's kind of what they were preventing, is him just getting here. If you watched him with Will, he just was kind of joking around, not really wanting to answer questions or just kind of going through the motions. And that's kind of what they were trying to prevent.
Yeah, it also would not be the first time that Nathan has stolen money and just walked away with it. So it was a concern that he would just take the money and run.
Yeah, I've heard that before. It says, do you assume moving on a flat plane when calculating for navigation or aerial travel? Is there any adjustment for curvature of the Earth?
The curvature of the Earth is factored into the flight plans, and I think I showed that with my Excel spreadsheet. The distances are based on the curvature of the Earth. There is actually another document, if I could just quickly show you, if we've got time to do that.
Sure.
Okay, let me just bring that one up. I just pulled it up while we were talking. Where are we? Over here. Yeah, this one here. This is an FAA document. It's not something the pilots would traditionally use unless they were a bit nerdy and they really wanted to know what was going on. But this is how they calculate the precision descent point for various different approaches. Now, the type of approaches we can fly is something called an ILS. That's based on a radio beacon on the ground pointing a signal up into the sky. So we follow that signal down. And that is going to be a straight line. But another type of approach is based on GPS and the aircraft altimeter. That's called a baro VNAV, a baro VNAV. Now that absolutely factors in the curvature of the Earth, which you can see there. This is the FAA document. I've got an entire video explaining this many years ago. You can clearly see the curvature of the Earth. You can see the equation that they use. You know, that's kind of beyond my math. You probably need to be Roo here for Walter Bisland to read that quite easily. But what's important is this one, the radius of the Earth, and that's the radius of the Earth in feet. So This is FAA document confirming that the curvature of the Earth is absolutely factored into instrument approaches. And let me just bring up Google. This is something I recommend. The Zoom.
That
file.
plane's in trouble right there.
Yeah, the Zoom file was just blocked. Block that. Let me type in Google.
The next person did ask, a theoretically displaced says, tell Wolfie I am gay for him, no homo. Somebody likes you. You have a
What was that, sorry?
Somebody says they're gay for you, no homo, so they're just a fan. Let's put it that way.
Okay. So type in Earth curve, baro VNAV approach, and it'll tell you something great. Baro VNAV. And that's the type of approach that we were just looking at in the FAA document. Vertical guidance derived from barometric altitude, while Earth curvature is factored in calculating the glide path. Approach is still reliant on the accuracy of the altimeter and the correct UNH setting. Earth curvature is a factor in the calculation of the glide path, but the approach is still reliant on the accuracy of the altimeter and the correct UNH setting. So yeah, it's absolutely factored into what we do.
Excellent. Wolfie, do you think it would be too expensive to charter a plane to fly, say, from Punta Arenas to Perth or something like that?
It's too expensive for me. It's very, very expensive. I mean, the type of aircraft that I fly, they usually go out at around $12,000 per hour. Now, when you charter, you've got to look at getting the plane to Punta Arenas. You know, you're paying. Right. If it's based in the US, you're going to have to fly it to Punta Arenas to start with, and then at the end of the charter, you're in Perth. You've got to get the plane back to the place where it lives. So, you know, so I don't know. I think a flight like that, realistically, you'd be looking at least $500,000. Yeah, and then you average that out to a per seat price, and it ends up being $3,000 or $4,000. And then on top of that, like you said, you're ending up, you have to get to Punta, and then you have to get home from Perth. Yeah, absolutely. Expensive. Absolutely. I mean, you could do it on a cost basis with a large aircraft, you know, where you could put hundreds of passengers, that the price would come down quite a lot. But on our aircraft, I mean, if you're going that range, you probably couldn't even fill it up with the full passenger load, which is 19 passengers. So, you know, you might be able to get 10 passengers on, which will then allow you to put full fuel. And, you know, you're putting minimum $500,000 across 10 passengers. It's $50,000 each. You know, it's a huge amount of money. Yeah, seems like it. And then I think that flat earthers wouldn't even buy that. They would just say it's a CGI flight or something. So probably wouldn't help much anyway. I would love to do it if anyone wants to pay. I'll offer my services for free. Yeah, I know. I'm getting bad. I started saying the other day I wrote into MC Tunes chat and said, I no longer believe in vacation homes in Hawaii, and I no longer believe that people stay there for a month, and just trying to see if anybody wanted to pay that for me. I thought that was like I could do that the rest of my life. Just say I don't believe in something and I'll get a trip somewhere. But I guess probably once is enough on that. All right, we've got Ray Callagher says, as a gyro technician, I can tell you, I guess I can put these on the screen for people to see. Oops, it was there. As a gyro technician, I can tell you simply explain that all aircraft fly in a phugoid motion, as I did to Jaron many times over the years.
What is that? Phugoid?
That's referring to what Robert was saying before, that if it deviates up slightly, it will automatically correct down.
Oh, gotcha.
And if it falls down slightly, it will automatically correct up. That's a phugoid. It's like if you think of it like a wave up and down, it's just balancing itself back to level flight. Yeah.
Gotcha. And Mr. Merrick says, what height do pilots need to start using oxygen?
14,000 feet typically, you would need to use it unless the aeroplane is pressurized. If the aeroplane's not pressurized, you can't go above 14,000 feet without oxygen. If it's pressurized, you don't need to use oxygen because the pressure, the altitude in the cabin might be only 4,500 feet, which you can read quite comfortably.
I had a question for you. I was thinking about this, Wolfie. Have you ever done the high altitude chamber?
Yeah, I did. I did when I was younger. When I was first learning to fly. Yeah, it's fascinating. You do 3 different. Have you done it yourself?
Yeah, I have, and so we got to go to the military base to do it. And essentially, Jaron, they put you in a high altitude chamber. You start pre-breathing oxygen, at least for us, and they take you up to 25,000 feet, and they give you, some math problems, something to read, and you take off your oxygen, and you see how long it is before you start losing your ability to concentrate.
How long is that? Not very long.
For me, it was about 2 minutes. People had different symptoms. Some people get cold. I started getting hot, like pins and needles in my fingers. Yeah. This couldn't really focus very well. But as soon as you put the oxygen back on again, it was like snap. I mean, you're back almost instantly.
It's amazing. Yeah, I did it when I was younger, and we did 3 different runs. We did medium altitude, high altitude, and we did the night run. And I don't know if you did that one, but they take you up to 15,000 feet without any masks, and they leave you at 15,000 feet for maybe 5 minutes, and it's all completely dark, pitch black in the chamber. And then they open up a panel at the end of the chamber, and they ask you to describe what you can see. And all I could see was, a bit of blurry red lights and a white light here and there. But that was it. We were describing we can see a red light, we can see a white light. They say, put your oxygen mask on, put it on, take 3 breaths. And what we were looking at was an aircraft instrument panel with all the dials, the artificial horizon, the gauges, but you just couldn't see what it was because you just didn't have the clarity of vision at that altitude.
Have you ever had vertigo in a flight? Like I know when you basically can lose sight of where the horizon is due to clouds and whatnot.
Yeah, I've had that. You get that quite a lot when you're first learning to fly on instruments. That's one of the biggest killers with pilots that are not instrument rated, flying in the cloud, knowing how to trust their instruments. They start to trust their sensors. They end up in a spiral dive and crash. So when you're doing instrument training, it can be quite unsettling that you believe you're turning, and the instructor's there and saying just trust your instruments, and it's just like learning to ride a bike, I guess. It's just a skill your body learns, just to ignore the sensations of what you're feeling and just trust the instruments to fly the airplane based on the instruments. But yeah, absolutely, definitely felt vertigo.
And how about either one of you UFOs and identified something you saw flying?
There was a time, and I've got a video about it, where we saw a SpaceX launch, and it was from the aircraft. We were going out of Arizona. We'd taken the aircraft to Arizona for maintenance, and we were flying home for Christmas by commercial airlines, and we were out of Arizona heading to Los Angeles, and on the left-hand side of the airplane was this bizarre trail of light. I've never seen anything like it. And, we were all looking, and what made it really spooky is when the pilots came on and said, for passengers on the left-hand side of the aircraft, we're seeing it too. We don't know what it is.
Oh, gosh.
And it was literally, I can honestly say I had a cold shiver go down the back of my spine thinking, my God, look, I'm actually looking at a UFO. And I was watching it and thinking, it's not an airplane. And I couldn't understand the big plume that was coming out of the back. And It was obviously going very, very fast. And sure enough, within 5 minutes, they came back and said, look, we've just spoken to ATC. It's a SpaceX launch. And it all fell into place. But
gotcha.
Just for a few minutes, it was like my whole world was just about to be turned upside down. Yeah.
Because it's probably one of those ones that's right after sunset, so it was getting lit up by the sun.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of videos about it. It came out of Vandenberg, one of the first ones that went up into the sunlight. Yeah, but we saw it from an aircraft, and that was just bizarre.
Yeah, it's crazy how many rockets are launching now. It's like 330 this year, so that's like one a day almost.
That is amazing. I watched a space shuttle launch years ago in Florida, but it was amazing.
There's nothing like seeing a shuttle launch. It was just, rockets are cool, but like the small rockets, like SpaceX rockets, but to see the shuttle take off, I mean, even the closest you could get to watch it as a civilian was the NASA Causeway 6 miles away, and you could just feel the base of the rocket pounding your chest. It was amazing.
Yeah, unbelievable experience. And I wish I filmed it, but back then, we didn't really have mobile phones.
No iPhones in your pocket? No, man.
No, I didn't have a cell phone back then.
5 minutes.
I had a friend at the time who had one of the early bag phones, if you remember those.
Oh, I do. My dad used to have one of those, one that you wear over your shoulder.
Yep.
Yeah, my dad used to have one.
His MERCED.
Let's go 5 more minutes, just see if there's anything left here. We've got Icy Spin said, would the pressure be equal everywhere if there was indeed a firmament container?
Look, I would have to say no. I would have to say no, that it would still be a pressure gradient, I believe.
Yes. Slightly, yeah, I think.
Unless, because we say that with you because we know that gravity exists, but if gravity didn't exist, would there be a pressure gradient?
No, if gravity did not exist and it was just like a container in space, so to speak, then I guess the pressure would be the same.
Yep.
Yeah.
Somebody says, have you all heard of, I don't know what this says, NOS Confundin or Italian PNC or Night God 777? No idea what they're talking about.
No.
Here's what it says if you want to read on.
Can't say that I have.
No, I can't.
Says, oops, not Night God 777, but Night God 333. Don't know what that is.
Neither one's familiar.
Okay.
No idea what they're talking about.
Swalla says, Witsit once asked about a 3-degree approach angle. Does both Wolfie and Robert agree it is judged based on distance versus current altitude rather than the angle measured on a flat plane?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. And that gets back to that FAA document that I showed with the curved approach path. That curved approach path is 3 degrees based on 3 degrees from the ground directly beneath. But there is a difference to that. The instrument landing system, which is the radio beam, that is 3 degrees measured from the location of the runway. So it's going to put you in a slightly different position when you're starting the ILS or starting a Barrow VNAV, and that's why there was that diagram showing the slight difference in the approach angle.
Okay, we've got Swalla says, oops, that's the one we just did. As pilots, what are your opinions on the recent test flights by Boom Supersonic and the potential future of supersonic air travel with their boomless supersonic flight?
I think it's, from my view, I think it's pretty cool. Now, keep in mind the boomless supersonic flight, they're only flying at about Mach 1.2, and it's kind of the environmental conditions were where the sonic boom was still going out, but it was reflecting off the lower layers of the atmosphere and basically bouncing back up again. So it's not like they're Concorde level flying at Mach 2. I think those sonic booms would be so strong it would break through that layer. But it certainly, to me, is exciting that we might have a return to civilian supersonic flight, even if it's a little bit limited in nature.
Yeah. Oh, look, I think it's very cool, and our technology will always advance. But I'd say probably I'll be long retired before that becomes mainstream.
Yeah, probably.
Angle says, can you show a graphic of a path of descent being calculated showing Earth curve?
I just did in the FAA document.
Okay, thank you. Typically, how much does your altitude fluctuate when you're trying to keep it constant?
Depends on the weather conditions, but the flight management system, the autopilot, will keep it within like 10 feet quite easily. It just doesn't deviate. But coming in different parts of the world, coming in over the Rocky Mountains, you can get mountain waves, and we see it more as a speed variation because the aeroplane is very good at keeping altitude. It'll keep it within plus or minus 50 feet pretty much always. But we will see if we're in a massive downdraft, for example, the aeroplane is effectively climbing in that downdraft to maintain altitude. So we see a massive speed reduction, and then a few moments later, when the updraft happens, the aeroplane's speed accelerates. So the altitude is held very accurately, but we will see it as a speed variation as the aeroplane's fighting the mountain waves.
Yeah, and that's kind of a difference in that Wolfie's got a tremendous amount of power, and the little airplanes I fly, when I was doing my initial flight training, we were about 30 miles north of a dissipating thunderstorm, but we were still underneath what we call the Class B shelf, so still flying underneath the airspace of the major airport. And we got caught in an updraft that started taking us up into the Class B airspace. And I literally was pointing the nose 30 degrees towards the ground, and we were still climbing. because that updraft was so strong. Because my airplane weighs less than 3,000 pounds.
Yeah, well, when you do your pilot training, at least in Australia, when you're a private pilot and you're doing your cross countries, the requirement is that you've got to be able to manually fly plus or minus 200 feet. So when you're flying along, if your assigned altitude is 6,000 and you're deviating up and down 100 feet or so, that's totally within the acceptable limits for a private pilot. But when you go up to the commercial level, you've got to demonstrate that you're able to fly. This is not with the autopilot. This is actually hand flying the aeroplane within plus or minus 100 feet. So, so that is a tighter tolerance for a commercial pilot. And, with a bit of practice, it's not that difficult. It's not a case of you bust 100 feet, you instantly fail. It's whether you recognize it, and, anytime we fly as a crew, if we see any deviations from the perfect approach path or the perfect speed, we might be on final. We're looking for 130 knots for our approach speed. There's a slight gust, and for example, I see my speed going up to 140 knots. I'll just verbalize that so that my co-pilot knows that I've seen it and that I'm correcting. So speed high noted, correcting, so that the co-pilot knows that I'm on top of the situation. Deviations occur as long as you're monitoring them and you're making corrections. When you're trying to maintain the height, if you deviate just slightly beyond that 100 feet, but you immediately recognize it and say altitude correcting, the examiner's not going to fail you for that. There's a bit of fudge factor in there.
Okay, a few more. We'll be done. We got this one here. Have either of you gentlemen either flown over or been into the Great Sand Dunes NP in southern Colorado? Just wondering.
Oh yeah. Let me see. It may take me a minute. I've flown over it before, so I have a picture of it from the air. So I will make an attempt to see if I can find it real quick.
No, personally, no. I can't say I'm familiar with that area.
Okay, we got B. Woody.
It's pretty cool to see it from the air.
He says, would the AI, I'm assuming that's the, not the
attitude
AI,
indicator,
yes, settle properly if you kept the plane in a coordinated turn during the settling time?
That's a really good point. If you kept the aeroplane in a constant turn and you just kept going around and around, the AI will align to the turn. So it's going to align incorrectly because as you're turning, as you're turning, you've got the vector of gravity, obviously, and you've also got the centrifugal force. So the resultant is not vertical anymore. It's like at a slight angle based on your angle of bank. Over a period of time, the correcting mechanisms in the gyro will start to align to that new position. And it's something the pilots learn when they're doing their instrument training, and you've heard of aircraft going into holding patterns, aircraft in holding patterns when things get busy. The holding patterns are never circles, and they're racetrack patterns, so you'll do a 180-degree turn, then you will fly straight for 2 minutes, then you'll do another 180-degree turn and fly straight for 2 minutes. And one of the major reasons for that straight sector is so that your instruments don't develop an error from a constant turn. 180-degree turn, there'll be almost no error induced. You then fly straight for 2 minutes. Any tiny error would be corrected, and it happens every time you turn. And the error induced in such a short turn would be so small you probably wouldn't even notice it. But yeah, definitely it will align to the turn. Yeah.
Okay, we got if you go directly east in an airplane, do you need to constantly turn to the left to maintain going east?
No.
Well, that's not how we fly.
Trick question.
No.
Look, if I was trying to maintain a specific latitude while flying, it would be so imperceptible, due to the size of the Earth. It would be so imperceptible how small it is. But if we are flying a great circle track and we start off east, we're not going to be continuing on the easterly heading, and we'll be starting to deviate off that latitude very quickly. So,
where that question comes from, Wolfie, is as much as they say that if the Earth is a globe, we're always dipping the nose. Then people throw back, if you're flying on flat Earth and you want to say follow the equator, you'd be turning left or right to follow the equator, because the equator is a circle on flat Earth. So that's where that question came from.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, and I think Wolfie's right that the Earth would be too big to even notice that. I mean, you couldn't know if without a background landscape, you wouldn't know that you were doing a circle if you did a 50-mile circle in a car. You wouldn't even know. So let alone doing 24,901. How can humans exist in space when there's no color? We only get color, I believe, because of water. What? I don't know. I don't think that's real.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
Any chance of debating Riley?
Who's Riley?
I would love to. Anthony Riley, Sleeping Warrior. Yeah, I'd absolutely love to.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Anytime, Anthony. Come along. Let's talk about the lift equation.
Yeah, the guy is a quality person. Somebody asked, do you watch Kelsey 74 Gear? Is he fairly accurate? His comment section can get ugly even without flat earthers.
I have seen his channel. I wouldn't say I watch it religiously, but I have seen a number of his videos. I mean, he seems okay. What he said was okay. What I saw, but it was probably 2% of his full content.
Yeah, I saw very little. Okay. Christiana Umenhofer says, Jaron, are you a solid glober or are you flexible in questioning should some FE revelation come about? Well, I think you always want to be open to new evidence, but there will be no flat earth that ever comes along. I just know that because the AE map is the only map that can describe the earth even close, and it's so far off it's not even close. But anytime if we tried to do a new map, you're going to always have the North Pole, and then you're going to have to lay out the continents, and they're going to have to be laid out the way that they are because that's reality. And we know what the sun does. It does the tropics and the equator and then the tropic. That's required. So once you put that down, it's an AE map again. So you will never ever find a map that explains backwards moving suns or again, in the South, the sun sets right to left for every person, every sunset. And that is impossible, let alone. There's nothing going to come up. So it's kind of a trick question as well. I'm open to it, but no.
Darren, I found it for you.
Okay.
Let's share my screen real quick.
Sure.
I have 2 pictures.
Wow.
Yeah. So it doesn't look like much from the air. It's kind of coming from a little further away. When you're actually climbing over those things and you're huffing and puffing because you're climbing up 40 feet of sand.
Wow.
You definitely feel it.
What do they say that's from?
That's a good question. I don't think I ever really looked into the geology of it. I think it's maybe some erosion coming down the mountains.
Huh.
But it definitely was. You can kind of see how tall these things are when I really zoom in on it. But yeah, it's a fun place to visit.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And this was obviously early spring. Actually, it was June.
Wow.
Because towards the end of the year, that river dries up as the snow melts out of the mountains. At that time of year, the kind of campgrounds kind of up over here, and you can kind of walk up and down the river as you go into the sand dunes.
This question's a real good one. Why so many names for something that doesn't exist, i.e. dome, there is domes. I've got a dome in my garage. I've got a dome on my desk, a glass dome. So that exists. Firmament or rakia or expanse, there's expanse. Molten mirror, there's a mirror. Or mirror looking glass, that exists. Vaults exist. Tents exist. God exists. Awesome ice exists. And God's footstool exists. So those things all do exist. Maybe not in some people's minds, but the idea behind it exists. Can you ask the pilots if they've ever seen the green flash, which is a phenomenon that happens only at sunset on the ocean? I think it's only the ocean, where it's perfect. You see a green at sunset.
I've never seen it, to be honest. And I've done a lot of filming of sunsets with solar filters, without. But I've looked for it, I've heard about it, but I can't say that I've ever seen something that was definitely a green flash.
Cryptrick, what's going on, my friend? He says, thank you, Jaron and guest. This is very informative. Answered many of my questions. All right, well, I don't want to keep you guys too long. It was really nice of you to stay this long. We're almost at 2.5 hours. So you guys have any final words for everybody?
No. Thanks, Jaron. I really appreciate your time. Never thought I'd be on this channel as a guest, but,
hey,
new world, and it's been fantastic.
You never know what's going to happen. Well, thank you, Robert, for setting it up and everything was good. Appreciate it.
I just want to say it was an honor to get to meet Wolfie and do this discussion with him. Wish Nathan would have shut up, but I think we pretty much knew that, as we've seen, he's a coward. He'll never actually debate anybody with actual knowledge of a topic. So everybody feel free to keep hammering him on the next couple of days. Hey, why didn't you show up? The money was sitting there waiting for you.
I'm waiting for David Weiss to debate me.
That would be awesome, but he'll never do it. And it's kind of and Jaron, you tell me if you agree.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got I'm going to call them the smart flat earthers like Weiss and DeBay. They will never ever leave their echo chambers. They never leave the place where they control the mute button. They control the narrative. You've got flat earthers like Flatzoid who doesn't really seem to give a shit. Him and Alonso, they'll go on any show and make an absolute fool out of themselves.
Yeah, I don't know why they do that.
With Nathan, but Nathan is just smart enough that he won't. I don't think he was surprised by Duffy, that Duffy absolutely destroyed him. I think Nathan was really out of his element there. He was expecting it to be easier, but Will did a great job and destroyed him. But Nathan will never go against actual experts, and they got different types of people.
Yeah, I think
Will's a really fantastic guy. I've caught him a number of times on this time I've had in Denver, so it's been really good.
Yeah, Professor Dave, I think, scared Dave Weiss from ever doing a debate again. That'll never happen. It was kind of
he's the smart cookie.
One and done. All right, well, appreciate it. Thank you, Wolfie and Robert, for joining me. And I'd like to apologize again, Wolfie, and to any other pilot. I thought I knew what I was talking about. I didn't. So part of that problem is researching things with a preconceived or desired outcome. Then you look at flights and you're trying to make it fit what you believe, and that's not the proper way to go about reviewing evidence. So what happens when you do that? It's a very quick way to be very wrong. And I hope I didn't say anything too rude. I'm sure some things were rude, but I didn't mean it. I do apologize. So sometimes in life you're wrong, just remember that.
Absolutely, Jaron. And the same goes right back at you. I apologize for some things we've said. We had emails in the past. Some were, most of them I think were fairly amicable. We had a few heated words occasionally, and I do apologize for things I might have said that were not right. But we learn, we move on, we accept that we make our mistakes, and that's the best we can do. Yep.
And I'll make more, I'm sure. So anyway, if you flat Earth believers, if you believe that all globe believers are liars or paid off, just know that you'll never accept any evidence that comes from outside your belief system, and then you're just going to be a flat earther forever. Which maybe that's your goal. That's fine, but you'll never wake up and the Earth be flat. So you're kind of just banging your head against the wall for I don't know what reason.
There's no happy endings in flat Earth.
No, I don't think so. Don't see that happening. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back. What do I've got? Today's Wednesday. Tomorrow night I'm on with Alan. Alan's going to be trying to show me this celestial theodolite, whatever they're talking about with that. So I'll get a chance to review that and hear what they've got to say. Join me for that. That'll be on Alan's channel, Space Audits, and that's about it. So I remind you guys, please do your own research. When you do, you'll never again think that you can't tell the shape of the ground by looking at the lights in the sky. Guess what? You can. Till next time, this has been Jeranism with Robert Greenlee and Wolfie6020 for the first time ever.
Thanks, Robert.
Later, guys. Peace.
Thanks, guys.